Chapter 640, The Black Gold Seal Soldier vs Qian Qing. The long sleeves blew in the air and rippled in waves. Tsing Lianer stood serenely. There wasn't a sound on the battlefield. The Palm Cliff was defeated as simply as this. Everyone's expression was shocked and they were left speechless. Even though they did not personally experience Mr. Tong's Palm Cliff, but the cold killing intent and cold presence that radiated off it was felt. The ones who knew about the Palm IMO skill were shocked speechless. Tsing Lianer's gaze moved around and she smiled under everyone's shocked gaze. At this time, her beautiful face bleached white. She could not control her body and suddenly dropped out of the sky. Several figures leapt out of the frontier guards. They were extremely fast as they shot towards Tsing Lianer. Zhuo Mo's eyes gave off a sharp light as he snorted coldly. His figure flashed, disappearing from where he was. Almost at the same time, Agui's body also disappeared. Bam! A figure grunted as though he was hit by something heavy and flew away. Agui appeared in front of this group of frontier guard experts like a ghost. There seemed to be an unspeakable presence on Agui's wooden and lifeless face. The purple energy in her eyes was clear as she looked indifferently at the experts flying towards her. Her posture was extremely strange, one foot was placed high and one was placed low as though she was stepping on a stair. That pair of flawless feet held an eerie beauty. The remaining people were intimidated by Agui's uncanny attack and didn't dare to charge forward. Zhuo Mo grabbed the unconscious Tsing Lianer. He then sighed a moment later. She was just tired. Even though he didn't have a good impression of Tsing Lianer, they had known each other for some time. Additionally, Tsing Lianer was so cooperative and listened to his requests to the extent that he couldn't even complain. A few strands of the 3,000 threads of worry nimbly wrapped around Tsing Lianer, freeing up both of his hands. Looking at the people facing Agui, murderousness boiled in his eyes. The moment that Tsing Lianer had her breakthrough, the Shen power in his body had been stimulated. It had started to circulate on its own. Many of the things that had been difficult for him to understand flowed easily through his mind, and it was a joy. However, what he hadn't expected was that the change in his Shen power had not benefited his Shen power, but his Mo physique instead. 10 Crow Celestial Apparatus. If his body was completely naked now, people would clearly see that all 10 suns on his body were brightly lit up. The brightest was the sun script between his brows. The dark gold script, which was complex and exquisite, glimmered like there was gold flowing through it. With the anti-dragon claw on his back, Zhuo Mo already gave people the feeling of being domineering. Adding on the blinding sun script on his forehead, he seemed even more like a god descended to the mortal realm. He was someone that people could not directly stare at. The active and restless Shen power flowed from his right hand into his body. The 10 sun matrices were like whirlpools that continuously absorbed Shen power. Zhuo Mo did not know what would result from this change. Shen power and the 10 Crow celestial apparatus were silently merging together. Zhuo Mo took a deep breath. This was not the best moment for a breakthrough. That would wait until he finished taking care of these people. At this time, a ripple suddenly came from his ring. The black gold seal soldier appeared next to Agui. He looked around sneakily and drawled, "Born to battle." When he saw the Mo steeds of the frontier guards, his eyes lit up. His expression immediately became excited. He licked his lips and puffed out his chest. He said with a righteous tone, "Sister Agui, I'll help you." Agui did not turn back to look at him. The black gold seal soldier had one hand placed on his hip and one hand pointing as he started to swear, "Hey! You insignificant peons, move to the side, don't waste time. Ye has been hungry for a long time, cough cough, yes hand has been itching for a long time." Qian Qing and Ding Dong were the two in front of Agui. The two looked with shock and uncertainty at Agui. Just now, they had seen their other fellow die to Agui's sudden attack. Agui's attack had come without any warning or movement. Just like Tsing Lianer, it was uncanny and unpredictable. Was this another person that cultivated Shen power? They too didn't even look at the black gold seal soldier. MO puppets existed in the MO territories, but most of them were nothing special. MO puppets couldn't influence a battle at this level. It was much harder to create a MO puppet that could fight against top generals than it was to cultivate to become a top general. While the black gold seal soldier seemed lively, the two did not place any importance on him. But clearly, the black gold seal soldier was very displeased with how they dismissed his presence. The dark face that mirrored Zhuomo's face bared its teeth viciously. You dare to dismiss ye? I'll eat you. Finishing, he charged at the two. A figure returned next to the chariot and reported in a low voice, Mr. Tong is dead. It really is a pity. Mr. Tong was a rare expert to have been able to cultivate the palm IMO skill to such a level. The voice from the chariot was slightly regretful. Shen power is as dominant as expected. This person was called Wu Yu. He was the most powerful expert under Marshal Ye's command and highly trusted. There were many experts in Marshal Ye's service, and there were 10 that were called the 10 Yu Frontier Guards. Qian Qing and Ding Dong were among them. Wu Yu was the first of the 10 Frontier Guards and led them. Mr. Tong had ranked 6th out of 10. Qian Qing ranked 7th, Ding Dong 5th. The person that Agui had killed had been called Song Long and ranked 10th. The 10 Yu Frontier Guards had an elevated status. Each one of them had been experts that were regional commanders, and Marshal Yu had spent great effort to gather them. I had not expected that Xiao Mo Gu would also have many experts in his command, Marshal Yu said slowly. So young, yet so able. As expected, an accomplished youth. Wu Yu smiled and said, when this subordinate was at his age, my time was spent in the pleasure quarters and bars. Compared to Xiao Mo Gu, that was a total waste. Hearing Wu Yu speak so roughly, Marshal Yu chuckled. If Ding Dong and the others hear you say this, wouldn't they be ashamed? Wu Yu smiled. Marshal Yu suddenly said, you seem to be entering martial level soon. Wu Yu grimaced. The time has not arrived. Marshal Yu said lightly, I will make a copy of the Shen power for you. It will be up to you if you can break through or not. Thanks, Lord. Wu Yu suddenly became excited. He had been stuck at the peak of general level for a long time but had been unable to find a solution to break through to martial level. He knew that if he kept on going like this, his chances of a breakthrough to martial level would decrease. Helping you is also helping me. When you are in martial level, I will be able to relax. The voice inside the chariot held tiredness. Wu Ye's expression was solemn. This one will not fail what Lord has given. Qian Qing is about to lose. Marshal Yu was slightly surprised. Xiao Mo Gu has such a powerful Mo puppet. Wu Yu stilled and his mind turned back to the battlefield. Qian Qing had never been in such a sorry state. He had never thought there would be a day when he was being beaten by a Mo puppet and by such a large margin. This Mo puppet was extremely strange. When it fought, strange characters would appear on its body. Even Qian Qing, who was knowledgeable, didn't recognize any of them. But it was extremely dangerous. He didn't dare to touch them. After a few rounds, he was suppressed by the black gold seal soldier. Qian Qing was of high birth. The bloodline of the bright void cicada Mo gave him unparalleled speed. He was also able to tear apart space at will. Space tear could enable a weak Mo to become an expert that killed without a trace. He would appear out of nowhere and outmaneuver his opponent. But no matter how he tore and jumped through space, the black gold seal soldier seemed to be able to predict his movements, and those two fists were waiting for him. Damn it! He didn't know what the characters on the fists of the black gold seal soldier were. Every time Qian Qing looked at them, he was unable to suppress a threat of terror. Qian Qing was talented and experienced. He knew what this threat of unknown terror meant. Only something extremely dangerous could make him instinctively feel danger. How was it possible? Wasn't this black guy in front of him a MO puppet? Had he met a peerless MO puppet? Qian Qing was both shocked and furious. However, if he left the battlefield now, his situation would become extremely terrible. His ranking among the 10 frontier guards would quickly fall, and most importantly, the Lord would lose faith in him. There was nothing scarier than that. The bloodline of the Bright Void Cicada MO was noble, but they were no longer had the great numbers of the past. The reason that the clan had prospered in these past few years was because he had managed to find shade under the great tree that was Marshal Yu. He was a smart person and he understood lords' like and dislikes very well. If he died in battle, his family would still receive the care of Marshal Yu and would not fall into decline. If he ran from battle, he would lose everything he possessed now. In a short moment, Qian Qing made his decision. He stopped. The wind blew past his face as his panicked eyes calmed down. Space Tear was the talent that all Bright Void Cicada MO experts had, and the most famous ability of the Bright Void Cicada MO clan. He was very familiar with the technique, but this was not his only offensive attack. Relying on only just Space Tear, he entered the top 10 of the Frontier Guards. There were not many that knew of the MO physique he cultivated or the domain formed by his MO physique. This was his secret. Compared to their current low numbers, the Bright Void Cicada MO had once existed in great numbers and produced many experts. They were natural-born assassins, and served many factions. But in secret, they had gathered MO skills from every place they served. The experts of each generation would use these MO skills and the Bright Void Cicada MO bloodline as the foundation to create many MO physiques. These MO physiques were endlessly varied and each had their own attributes. Even within the Bright Void Cicada MO family, there would rarely be people who would cultivate the same MO physique. Because of the decline of the Bright Void Cicada MO, the MO physiques that the clan's people cultivated were not kept secret like in the past. But no one knew the MO physique of one person, Qian Qing, the most accomplished Bright Void Cicada MO of the present. He hadn't thought that the first time his MO physique was seen in public that it would be to face a MO puppet. The terror on Qian Qing's face disappeared. What replaced it was strong confidence. Chapter 641, Together Luo Li seemed to be in a lucid dream. It was a very strange dream. He knew that he was dreaming, but everything in the real world was so clear. He could hear the breathing of Xiaogua and Liying Feng shimmy. He could feel the small molecules floating in the air. He could feel the flows of air from tens of miles away that were almost imperceptible as though they passed next to him. He could feel the vitality hidden inside the ground. His senses felt outside world in such detail with his mind's eye. Yet what was in front of him was only darkness, a darkness filled with the presence of death. He was already dead. This piece of knowledge remained on his mind for an unknown number of days. At the beginning, he had been immersed in that rich and detailed world. He had explored it, and everything that happened in the surroundings did not escape his eyes, though he could not see it. But when he gradually mastered this technique, or rather, this unique method, the black deathly dream did not change at all. He did not forget the reason he was here. That beautiful figure that haunted his mind entered his dream. He tried to do all he could to add color to this dream of darkness and death. He created colors that he used to draw out that figure he could not forget. When the last bit of color entered Woli's eyes, the wooden Woli suddenly came to life. The elegant and serene figure was like a lotus bud in bloom. The clear eyes added a hint of murderousness. She looked at Luo Li with a complicated gaze. Her lips moved and she suddenly sang, "I live, thou die, this is separation." Boom! It was as though something struck Luo Li's head. The black world started to crumble. He felt his body become transparent as Woli's body became tangible. The blackness gathered between the two of them and formed a black chain with one end connected to Luo Li's body and the other to Woli's body. An understanding came to Luo Li and his mind was filled with happiness. Life-death lock, so this was the life-death lock. No, he felt that the name, life-death lock, was not appropriate. The person who had created this technique had never predicted the changes that would occur in the future. His mind moved. He suddenly pointed at the black chain and said firmly, "This chain is called, together." When Wu Li heard this, her body shook slightly. Her cool gaze softened. Shrouded in sword essence, her lips moved again as she sang, "Separated in life and death, two hearts chained together, never to be apart even in reincarnation." When her words ended, countless complex characters flew out of their bodies and spread along the chain. The characters that came out of Luo Li's body flashed with a black light while the scripts that came out of Wu Li flashed with a white light. The two energies connected in the middle of the chain. Ding! The chain shook and suddenly turned bright red. Those metal links transformed into love knots tied from red string that connected the two. The red string gradually became faint until it disappeared. But Luo Li could easily feel the red string. He knew that from today onwards, his fate would be forever tied to Wu Li's fate. Even death would not be able to separate them. He also knew that he was not a living person any longer. But joy filled his heart. It was worth anything to see her again. The transparent wings on Qian Qing's back vibrated at a rapid rate. Transparent ripples spread into the surroundings with Qian Qing as the center. When the first wave of ripples came close, Ding Dong, who was next to Qian Qing, recognized the power and retreated rapidly. These transparent ripples seemed weak like hair floating in the air. When the first ripple met the black gold seal soldier, his body suddenly lit up. The formation scripts seemed to be stimulated and floated onto his skin. The careless smile on the black gold seal soldier's face disappeared and his gaze immediately became cold. A sound skill. Those seemingly harmless ripples were an extremely powerful kind of sound attack. Cicada silk block. That was the name of the MO physique he cultivated. Other than himself, no one knew of this. In the Bright Void Cicada MO family, sound skilling were a minor technique. However, this, Cicada silk block, was extremely powerful. It was very hard to cultivate, so there were not many that had successfully done so. Beside the chariot, Wu Yu was slightly surprised. Qian Qing actually had a trick like this up his sleeve. It seems that he has some hope of victory. The Bright Void Cicada MO bloodline is noble. In the past, it had been very strong. Even though it has declined greatly, they still have some assets. This sound MO skill isn't bad. It seems that there is still value in nurturing him, Marshal Yu said lightly. Wu Yu nodded and said, "I will take care of this. This MO puppet is really extraordinary. If Lord can get Xiao Mo Gu into your service, he is worth 9 of the guards." Marshal Yu was also moved by this but remained slight. The fighting in the sky was intense. The ancient character on the black gold seal soldier's palm was very sturdy. The sound skill ripples that were even sharper than flying swords would be fended off by a sweep of his hand. But the cicada silk block came endlessly from all directions. Qian Qing was channeling his MO physique to its limits. He did not keep anything back. The transparent wings on his back moved and blurred until it turned into a patch of light. The cicada silk blocks increased and became even more densely packed. A strange smile suddenly appeared on the black gold seal soldier's lips. When this strange smile appeared on a cold and indifferent face, it became even more eerie. He suddenly puffed out his mouth and inhaled. Hiss! Like a whale sucking in water, the cicada silk blocks that filled the air flew into the black gold seal soldier's mouth. In a blink, all the cicada silk blocks in the air were gone as though someone had diligently cleaned all of them. Burp! The black gold seal soldier burped in satisfaction. He grinned, baring his teeth, as he waggled his eyebrows at Qian Qing. "Bro, you got more." Qian Qing was left dumbstruck. Ding Dong hadn't expected that his action of retreating would cause a Gue to attack. A Gui suddenly appeared like a ghost next to him and started the fight. His reaction was quick. He knew how powerful a Gui was and he pointed towards a Gui. A crisp green light suddenly shot out of his finger towards a Gui. A Gui's bare feet stepped on the empty air and her figure suddenly disappeared. Bam! Ding Dong seemed to be struck by a heavy hammer. His body shook and he was forced multiple steps backwards. His expression was ugly. He knew that a Gui would be even more troublesome than the black gold seal soldier, but only when they actually fought did he truly understand how difficult a Gui was to deal with. The other's attacks never showed any warning signs and were strangely powerful. A crack appeared on a piece of armor on his back. Ding Dong was a green turtle mo from eastern Xijia. The turtle shell he grew was difficult to damage with flying swords and was almost the strongest armor that could be found. It was by relying on this impenetrable armor that he could survive countless battles, grow, and reach the status he had today. But he looked at a Gui with terror. A Gui's attack just now had caused a crack to appear on his armor, something which had never cracked before. Damn it! Yet a Gui did not show any mercy. Her hands continued to move. Bam bam bam. The string of powerful attacks hit Ding Dong like raindrops. With every blow, Ding Dong's body would shake. After a string of successive attacks, his body flew and shook like dice. No matter which direction he fled in, a Gui's attacks would not miss. The purple energy in a Gui's eyes was burning as she slapped at the air, yet her gaze was not on Ding Dong but on Zuemo. Her gaze was filled with concern. Zuemo detected a Gui's gaze, but at this time, he was unable to respond. There was a complete transformation occurring inside his body. Shen power and the Mo physique were merging. Each tiny tendril of power that flowed through his body burned like lava. The 10 sun scripts were like 10 suns and gave off astounding power and heat. What shocked Zuemo was that they were slowly revolving in unique paths. But Zuemo did not have the time for admiration and shock because he found the true method to use the 10 crow celestial apparatus. Revolutions. When the 10 suns revolved, a vast and strong power filled his body. This power was unlike the power of the 10 crow celestial apparatus he had discovered before. It was both young and strong, but it was not domineering. It was as vast as the ocean and warm as the sun. Zuemo reflexively channeled the 10 crow celestial domain that he was still unfamiliar with. That vast yang power furiously flowed into his 10 crow celestial domain. The revolutions of the 10 suns suddenly accelerated. Even more power flowed into the 10 crow celestial domain. Zuemo seemed to have entered another world. The 10 crow celestial domain quickly inflated like a balloon. When it reached a certain size, it did not grow anymore, but the revolutions of the 10 suns did not stop. Power was still flowing into the 10 crow celestial domain. A hint of understanding came. The sun was domineering in one aspect, but its heat created life for all beings. The sun was the beginning of all life. When these words appeared in his mind, his body suddenly shook at the same time. The 10 crow celestial domain that was filled with power transformed again. Vitality erupted. Green grasses sprouted. They grew at an astounding rate and formed a sea of grass in a blink in front of Zuemo. Then, little trees grew out of the grass. They grew up into the sky and formed a dense forest. Animals started to appear in the forest. Zuemo seemed to gain an understanding. He raised his head and looked at the sky. There was a sun hanging high up. But as power flowed in, another sun formed. A third one, a fourth one. The trees and grasses started to wither, the earth started to crack, and the animals died. When the 10th sun appeared in the sky, fire erupted from the burnt earth. The sky was dark red. Streams of fire flowed and burned, and it seemed like hell. 10 crow celestial domain, the hell domain. Chapter 642, Wuyu and Bihan saw Zhua Mo and Agui move to act, his eyes narrowed into thin blades. He perceptively realized that the Yu frontier guards were unable to control themselves. While their ranks still looked orderly on the surface and unchanged, Bihan could feel the urges under this calm. This was an intuition difficult to describe. Bihan's mind gradually calmed and his gaze deepened. When the enemy could not resist from acting, it usually meant an opportunity would appear. He did not have as much manpower as the enemy and he needed to capitalize on an opportunity. Wu Yu decided to act. If he did not act, Qian Qing and Ding Dong would both die on the battlefield. The 10 Yu frontier guards had already lost Mr. Tong today. If Qian Qing and Ding Dong were also lost, then it really would be a heavy blow. It was not so easy to recruit experts of this level. Miss, have mercy. Wu Yu was very fast and suddenly appeared near Agui to try and rescue Ding Dong. Agui and the Black Gold Seal soldier were strong and each had their skills, but he did not fear them. He was halfway into martial level, and could be called a quasi-martial. He would be considered a top-tier expert in the 100 Savage of the Dark. When he stepped into the air, a feeling of extreme danger rose. His heart shuddered and his right hand reflexively struck out from his side. Bam! His hand shook and he had to channel his MO skill to suppress this strange burst of energy. Was this Shen power? Before he could think further, Agui's attacks came in succession. Agui's hands slapped at the air but did not make a sound or any light. However, Wu Yu felt like a mouse caught in the stare of a cat. His hairs stood on end and there was a feeling of extreme danger on his mind. Wu Yu recognized the severity of the situation and his expression turned grave. His right eye suddenly lit up and a cool blue light shot out. The air in front of him became as hard as iron. Bam! The air exploded. Cold flows of air gusted out in all directions. Wu Yu was shocked but his gaze became even hotter. As expected of Shen power. His move just now was called Ice Blue. It was extremely cold and could even freeze air until it was as hard as iron. If one was caught by it, they would most likely die immediately. Agui's attacks were hard to predict and wondrously powerful. He hadn't thought that Ice Blue would be defeated so easily. But even so, Wu Yu was happy. His hopes of stepping into martial level finally showed hope. If he could comprehend Shen power, he would benefit greatly and entering martial level would only be a matter of time. Wu Yu was very experienced in battle and his power was great. With Ice Blue blocking the attacks for a moment, he managed to steady himself. On his back, a pair of pitch black bat wings spread. The edges of his wings were covered in blood-red bone spikes. Light flowed like fire. He also held a string of copper coins that were round on the outside and had square holes on the inside. There were 7 coins that were strung together with a black string. He snickered and threw the copper coins into the air. Black Heart treasure coins. Zhu Ke's pupils shrunk and his expression changed slightly. When the words were spoken, many people immediately changed expression. The Sky Missouri weapons were the top tier of MO weapon and up until now, there were only 20 articles that qualified for this rank. Some MO weapons were wondrous and powerful. While they were not as mysterious and incomprehensible as the Sky Missouri weapons, they were still top-grade MO weapons. The owners of those articles were all powerful people or the lord of a territory. These top-tier MO weapons that were ranked just slightly below Sky Missouri weapons were called Earth MO weapons. They were treasures that countless people in the MO territories dreamed of. There were 20 Sky Missouri weapons and 108 of the Earth MO weapons. The Blackheart treasure coins were one of those Earth MO weapons. No one had thought that the common-looking copper coins on Wu Ye's hands were the infamous Blackheart treasure coins. There were 7 Blackheart treasure coins. No one knew who had made them, but this MO weapon could form its own domain called the ineffectiveness domain. Inside this domain, the 5 elements would be thrown into chaos, even yin and yang would be reversed. The 7 treasure coins that flew into the air suddenly disappeared. The scene in front of Ague changed. What was under her feet was the blue sky and above her head was the great earth. Wu Yu smiled. Shen power was strong but it was direct. In his eyes, Shen power lacked transformations. He had ways of dealing with it. Once the ineffectiveness domain formed, even gods would have a hard time escaping. Yet just then, a crack came from nearby. Wu Yu stopped and then reacted. His expression changed and he had a bad thought. As expected, when he turned around, he saw Qian Qing with his neck twisted. The black gold seal soldier snickered at him. Wu Ye's face darkened. Marshal Yu was here, and they had lost so many people. With so many people as an audience, it would not be good if the news spread. He knew that Lord wanted to recruit Xiao Mo guest group, but if it became too ugly, then it would not be beneficial for anyone. A pity. This Mo puppet was very intelligent to have defeated Qian Qing. It was rare to see Mo puppets of this level. However, while he felt regret, Wu Yu did not have any intentions of holding back. He needed someone to make an example of. This would stop now. He snorted coldly. The bat wings on his back flapped. The smile on the black gold seal soldier's face suddenly froze. He seemed to be restrained by something and was unable to move. No matter how he struggled, he was unable to break free. The black gold seal soldier panicked and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Big bro, save me. Save me." Wu Yu laughed when he heard this. This Mo puppet was really interesting. But his expression turned heavy. No one can save you. He suddenly laughed. He was explaining this to a Mo puppet, how stupid. The black gold seal soldier was like a still pillar of gold, unable to move, and could only shout at the top of his lungs. Then a slightly hoarse voice came from behind Wu Yu. Really? Wu Yu was startled. Before he could react, the scene in front of him suddenly changed. A dark red sky with 10 suns suspended high up, a cracked earth desolate and endless as fire erupted from it. There was nothing that lived here. White bones piled up everywhere. A feeling of this being the end of the world rose. 10 Crow Celestial Domain. Wu Ye's expression turned stern. Xiao Mo Gu. As he expected, a thin figure with the enormous anti-dragon claw on his back appeared nearby. Wu Ye's expression quickly recovered as he examined Swat Mo curiously. "Oh, you just had a breakthrough. As expected, you are very talented. I noticed that you were at the threshold to completing your 10 Crow Celestial Domain. Now you are able to create this, that wasn't easy." He smiled calmly as the black bat wings on his back slowly flapped. Small flows of air blocked the burning air. "You are a talented person," Wu Yu said to himself as he flapped his wings. "Young yet having accomplished so much. It is the first time I have seen someone like you." It seemed to be praise. His expression was filled with disbelief. "You also cultivate Shen power. Something that many people dream of. You are very lucky." He shook his head and said seriously, "But today, you only have one path. Obey and surrender, swear fealty to my lord. In the future, we will not treat you unfairly. If you persist in resisting, do not blame me for being vicious. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I am also skilled in the secret technique of searching souls." Wu Yu suddenly smiled lightly. "Isn't it very hard?" Zhuo Mo's body imperceptibly shook. "This 10 Crow Celestial Domain far surpasses what your power can support. You are very talented to have comprehended to this level. But it is a pity that your body cannot tolerate it." Wu Yu said lightly, "I am only giving you this chance because you are talented. If your 10 Crow Celestial Domain is complete, you might be able to restrain me. But right now, you are not a match for me. Surrender, you don't have a chance. You really are too motherfucking chatty." Suemo forced himself to snort. His right hand shook slightly behind his back and he suppressed it. Wu Yu shook his head. The smarter the person, the more likely they do not know when to give up. Finishing, his wings suddenly flapped. A whirlwind appeared in front of him. The wind spun rapidly and the pillar of wind became thicker. It started to suck up the sand and stone on the ground. In a blink, this pillar of wind became dozens of zhang tall and was still increasing in size. Suemo did not speak. The 10 suns in the sky slowly revolved. Boom! Suddenly, dozens of fire pillars erupted and swallowed Wu Yu. It is useless. Wu Ye's voice came from behind Suemo. He appeared behind Suemo, untouched by the flames. That pillar of wind also absorbed much of the flames and formed an enormous pillar of wind that was over 5 li in diameter. It was like a pillar continuously reaching into the sky. Even the suns in the sky lost color in its presence. Sand and stone moved. The earth shook like dice. Suemo's expression became uglier, but he still put all his power into the revolution of the 10 suns. The suns were burning. The earth started to melt. The stones started to melt. Lava erupted from the cracks. In a blink, the lava flowed into countless rivers that crossed each other. You disappoint me, Wu Yu said indifferently. Almost at the same time, a cold light flashed across his eyes. He had discovered Xiao Mo Ge's position. Ever since Wu Yu stepped into the range of Xiao Mo Ge's domain, Xiao Mo Ge's position had been uncertain. The 10 Crow celestial domain was Xiao Mo Ge's domain and his presence had always been hidden well. Wu Yu had been using his speech to disturb the other so he would expose his position. While his words were easygoing, he was actually very wary of the 10 Crow celestial domain. It was the first-ranking domain in general level and it was very powerful. If he faced it head-on, even if he won, it would take great effort. And if he could find Xiao Mo Ge's position, then he would definitely win. When he discovered Suemo's position, he did not hesitate in attacking. While he had said those words, he did not spare anything and used a killing move. He did not have any intentions of leaving Xiao Mo Ge alive. Bat sickle. Suemo felt his body freeze. His body was restrained by a strong power around him. This power was very strange. No matter how hard he tried, he was unable to break free. Whoosh, Wu Yu suddenly appeared behind Suemo. His bat wings were like 2 great swords that sliced toward Suemo with green light. Wu Yu had the confidence that he could cut Suemo in half. At this time, Suemo did not seem to notice of the danger from behind him. A smile suddenly came onto his face. Chapter 643, Deadlock. Wu Yu could not see the smile when it appeared on Suemo's face, but for some reason, he had a feeling. His heart jumped. Did Xiao Ge have something up his sleeve? Yet his wings had already moved at full power. He did not hold anything back in this blow. His pair of wings almost disappeared into the air. Even the howl of movement could not catch up. Even if there was a mountain in front of him, he had the confidence he could cut through it. Suddenly, great pain came from his wings. Blood suddenly sprayed from Wu Ye's pair of indestructible wings. An indescribable pain came from his wings. Wu Yu immediately changed color. The wings seemed to have been cut up by very thin knives and fell into dozens of pieces in the air. In the air, dozens of strands that were as thin as hair flickered in and out of view. If it wasn't that there was blood on some of them, Wu Yu would not have detected them at all. What was this? Wu Yu felt terror. But before he could react, his body suddenly became restrained. Countless invisible threads tightly wrapped around him. These invisible thin threads were extremely strong. They started to tighten. Because they were very thin and strong, they were as sharp as knives. Wu Ye's strong emo physique was forcibly cut open by these tiny strands. Pew! Tiny sprays of blood seeped out from all parts of Wu Ye's body. The thin strands sank deeply and terrifyingly into his flesh. 3,000 threads of worry. The 3,000 threads of worry could restrain even the anti-dragon claw. Wuyu didn't have the power to resist them. The black sickle on Zhuo Mo's body had not yet disappeared. He was tightly bound, but his smile became even brighter. From the beginning he knew that his chances of success at defeating Wuyu with just the 10-crow celestial domain was not high. He put his hopes on the 3,000 threads of worry. The 3,000 threads of worry was something that could subdue something as vicious as the anti-dragon claw. It shouldn't have a problem against Wuyu. He really had used great effort to bait Wuyu to come close. Showing weakness, showing pride. Luckily, the outcome was as he had expected. The 3,000 threads of worry could shift from being tangible and intangible. The two of them were both restrained, but one could not forget that they were still inside Zhuo Mo's 10-crow celestial domain. Zhuo Mo had expended great effort to lock down Wuyu. He did not hesitate, and the killing moves came right after. The 10 suns in the sky suddenly spun. Whoosh! An extremely faint flame suddenly sprouted from under Wuyu. A blue light rose on Wu Ye's body that stopped the flame. Inside the blue energy, Wu Ye's expression was terrifying. His body was soaked in blood. A furiously murderousness flashed through his eyes as he bit his tongue. The blood on his body suddenly moved as though it was alive. Mo insects the size of a thumb climbed out of his blood. These Mo insects were completely covered in Wu Ye's blood, and Mo matrices could be seen on them. They quickly moved on Wu Ye's body. As the blood Mo insects moved, a thick layer of blood-colored light was released from them which shrouded all of Wu Ye's body. At this time, the blue light could not withstand the faint gold flame and crumbled. Zhuo Mo had a bad feeling. This blood-colored light was very hardy. Even though it hissed as it was being burned and slowly decreased in size, the speed was very slow. The faint gold flame was one of Zhuo Mo's last tricks. The sun crystal seed was inside his body, and the Shen power he cultivated had merged into the 10-crow celestial domain, which caused unexpected changes to happen to this 10-crow celestial domain. The Sun Shen fire was one of those. Originally, the flame of the 10-crow celestial domain should have been the 7th grade golden crow feet fire. The legend had it that the golden crow was covered in fire, and the 3 wisps on its feet were the most powerful. Those were called the golden crow feet fire. But Zhuo Mo had an immature sun in his body. This sun crystal seed formed the crux of Zhuo Mo's 10-crow celestial domain, which caused it to rise in power. But what really caused this change was Zhuo Mo's Shen power merging into the Mo physique. When the golden crow feet fire was touched by Shen power, it underwent an innate change which caused this newborn fire to be peerless in its dominance. This kind of fire had never been recorded before, so Zhuo Mo called it the Sun Shen fire. The Sun Shen fire was more domineering than all fires that Zhuo Mo had ever seen. If Zhuo Mo hadn't formed this fire, he would not dare to touch this fire at all. The golden crow feet fire was already 7th grade. This Sun Shen fire far surpassed it, so it probably was 8th grade. Even with its uniqueness, it was still being stopped by this layer of bloody light. How could Zhuo Mo not be shocked? What was this ghastly thing? Behind the curtain of blood, Wu Yu was even more astonished. These blood Mo insects were his ultimate life-saving measure. They were called bat blood insects. He usually fed them with all kinds of poisons, and varieties of bat blood, including his own blood. These bat blood insects were considered immortal. Unless it was a martial, normal Mo weapons and flames were ineffective against them. These bat blood insects could also travel through space at will and were hard to predict and defend against. If it burrowed into the body of the enemy, it would suck the other's blood and energies. Wu Ye's cultivation had grown in these years and rarely fought. However, he had carefully raised these bat blood insects. In this emergency, he released these bat blood insects. But he had not expected that the blood layer formed by the bat bloodworms could not stop the advance of 10 Crow Celestial Domain's fire. His first reaction was, this was impossible. While the 10 Crow Celestial Domain was the first domain in general level, Xiao Mo Gu definitely had not reached its complete form. The power of the 10 Crow Celestial Domain resided in its ability to channel the power of the world, not in its fire. How could it have such a powerful flame? What he found even harder to believe was that the thin invisible strands on his body actually restrained the bat blood insects. All of the bat blood insects were tightly restrained and could not break free and move through space. Watching as the blood barrier was slowly burned away, his hopelessness grew. Someone, come. Quick, help. A wail echoed through the 10 Crow Celestial Domain, but it could not pass out of the domain. Xuemo also felt extremely panicked. Right now, all of his power was focused on powering the Sun Shen power and he did not have any attention to spare. If someone really came to help, then it would not be good. Ding Dong had stopped and fled once Wu Yu had thrown out the Blackheart treasure coins and set up the ineffectiveness realm. He had been unable to breathe under a gooey storm of attacks and he finally managed to calm his mind slightly. Watching as Wu Yu easily restrained that terrifying and ugly woman, Ding Dong felt excited. Wu Yu Darren, as expected of the first seed of the 10 Yu Frontier Guards. His power was really unfathomable. He felt even more anticipation when he saw Wu Yu Darren easily playing with Xiao Mo Gu inside the 10 Crow Celestial Domain. Due to the fright and humiliation he had received, he wanted to kill this group with his own hands. Yet he was left gaping at the following events. In a flash, Wu Yu Darren was heavily wounded and unable to move. Watching as Wu Yu Darren was swallowed by the flames, Ding Dong was so frightened he almost turned and fled. Fortunately, the blood light that came after stopped the flames. Ding Dong was a very smart person. He quickly saw that while Xiao Mo Gu's 10 Crow Celestial Domain suppressed Wu Yu Darren, the two were in a deadlock. A daring thought flashed through his mind. If he could save Wu Yu Darren, in the future, he could do what he wanted under the command of Marshal Yu. Wu Yu Darren was the first expert in Marshal Yu's command and the person most trusted. Finding riches in danger. When he thought of this, Ding Dong gritted his teeth. He turned and charged towards Xuemo. Ha, you want to do something sneaky? The black gold seal soldier had a disdainful expression. Because Wu Yu did not have the attention to spare, he had used a way to break free of the bat sickle on his body. He looked at Ding Dong with a malicious smile. Ding Dong's heart went cold. How could he have forgotten this calamity? Qian Qing had died by the hands of this strange Mo puppet. Even he had been shocked at the power that Qian Qing had concealed. But even so, he had died terribly at the hands of this dark gold Mo puppet. Damn it! The black gold seal soldier's grin was terrifying in Ding Dong's eyes. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Dozens of figures flew out of the Yu Frontier Guards. They saw that Wu Yu Darren was in danger and came to help. Xu Long and the others also flew out when they saw this. The two sides started to fight in the sky. Xu Long and the others could be considered of above-average power in the Mo territories, but they had just fought and this was the moment they were most exhausted. At this time, they were just fighting by risking their lives. Adding on that they were skilled in cooperating, they managed to block this wave of attacks. The intensity of the battle in the air was almost unimaginable. The other people were watching entranced. Everyone was shocked at the hardiness of Xiao Mo Gu's subordinates. They had thought that these subordinates were tired after a hard battle but they were still unrelenting when facing the famous Yu Frontier Guards. Where had Xiao Mo Gu recruited such strong subordinates from? Many people found this hard to comprehend. They had all personally experienced that hard battle against the Ming bandits. Other than Zhu Ke and a few other powerful people, all of them were tired and completely drained of strength. Suddenly, a strange sound in the air rang over the entire battlefield. The ineffectiveness domain set up by the Blackheart treasure coins was divided in two from the middle as though two enormous hands had ripped it apart. The scenes inside the ineffectiveness domain disappeared. With a whine, the 7 Blackheart treasure coins landed with dimmed luster on the ground. A Gui stood silently in the air. This sudden event immediately changed the situation on the battlefield. Xu Long's side was naturally cheering while the Yu frontier guards had ashen expressions. They had seen how powerful the woman was just now. The Yu frontier guards immediately retreated. At this time, a sigh sounded across the entire battlefield. This marshal is very disappointed in your performance. Does this marshal have to personally fight? The Yu frontier guards who had been demotivated immediately flushed. Their eyes filled with blood as they moved forward to engage in battle again. The elite soldiers of the Yu frontier guards back in the ranks could not stop themselves from entering the fray. In a blink, the Yu frontier guards had the advantage. Yet just at this time, no one noticed a sharp light flash across Bihan's eyes. Chapter 644, The Golden Crow battering ram. Bihan had felt that the Yu frontier guards showed signs of relaxing and becoming disorganized. Now with the rush of seemingly random individuals, the previously strong defense was starting to fall apart. The elite Yu frontier guards that were stirred by Marshal Yu had started to fly out of the ranks. Empty spaces appeared among the organized ranks. These spaces appeared random and did not seem to be of great weakness to the Yu frontier guards' thick ranks. Even Marshal Yu dismissed it. For a troop that was 10,000 strong, the departure of several hundred people did not affect the overall strength of the battalion. However, Bihan did not think the same. The Yu frontier guards that had charged out were the elite members. They were not great in number but they were all core members of their little teams. They had a direct effect on the overall combat abilities of the Yu frontier guards. This effects of this would be hard to detect normally, but if the troops encountered a strong opponent, it would show. Looking at the Yu frontier guards that were flying out, Bihan suppressed his urges to fight. The weakness was slowly appearing but there was no change in the core formation of Marshal Yu's troops. Even if he charged in now, he would not be able to threaten the core formation. He continued to wait patiently. The Yu frontier guards who had been emboldened into battle were astoundingly strong in battle. Xu Long and the others immediately felt the pressure increase. However, as a Gui and the Black Gold Seal soldier joined the battle, the pressure on them decreased quickly. Experts like a Gui and the Black Gold Seal soldier could be of great effect in small-scale battles like this. The two did not have any match. Everywhere they passed, the elite Yu frontier guards would fall from the sky. They were like ghosts and hard to catch, not giving the enemy a chance to surround them. But the number of people in the sky increased. The usually proud Yu frontier guards were truly angry now. They crazily flew out of their ranks, and entered the battlefield. Beside the chariot, a subordinate could not resist urging, "Lord, we need to charge." "Charge?" Marshal Yu said slightly. "Yes," the subordinate said urgently, "only one charge would be needed. If this continues, the fatalities will be too high." A piece of the sky suddenly became dark red with 10 suns fixed at positions inside. They were slowly spinning at an indescribable and profound rhythm. They were like 10 magnets that attracted and repelled each other. Under the 10 balls of flame, a figure carrying a dragon claw stood proudly. Zhuo Mo's face was cold and golden scripts flickered through his eyes. A serene gold light lit up from the sun script at his forehead and he appeared like a god descending to mortal realms. "Kill!" The voice was like thunder and rang over the entire battlefield. The dark red sky suddenly expanded and quickly spread outwards from Zhuo Mo. This transformation came so quickly that more than 100 of the Yu frontier guards were unable to react before they were sucked in. The 10 suns suddenly released a powerful golden light that crisscrossed on the dark red sky, and flames flowed on the ground below. Among the golden flows of fire, the brigadier-level Yu frontier guard wailed and started to burn with a boom. They burned to ashes like dry wood in an instant. Inside the dark red 10-crow celestial domain, the 10 suns started to revolve slowly again. Such a powerful 10-crow celestial domain. Zhu Ke couldn't resist saying in shock. The soul MO lore that he cultivated was one of the top MO skills in the MO world, but it focused more on being unpredictable. He could not kill 100 brigadiers like this. 10-crow celestial domain, as expected of the first domain in general level. Unparalleled in its dominance. This move astounded the entire field. A brief pause even appeared on the heated battlefield. Everyone was shocked by such a dominating blow. The U Frontier Guards changed expression and unconsciously showed a threat of fear. Even though there was an enormous gap between Brigadier and General, every one of the general levels present were silent and shocked at seeing one move kill 100 Brigadiers. Zhu Ke and the others were even more astonished. They knew that Zhuomo's 10-crow celestial domain had been at an elementary level at the start of battle. But now 10-crow celestial domain was domineering and held a vast presence. Many people were also puzzled. The 10-crow celestial domain was very rare and most of them had never seen it before, but Xiao Mo guess, 10-crow celestial domain, seemed even more powerful than the records of 10-crow celestial domain. Shock and uncertainty mixed on people's faces. With a long shout, Zhua Mo shot up. When he was several hundred zhang in the air, he suddenly turned and like a spear, he dove down. The light of the sun shone at his brow. The air rushed past his face and his hair rippled in the wind. But his face was as hard as stone and did not change. The dark red space around him flickered like a flame. However, it spread across the sky like it did before but was closely held against Zhuomo's body. Those 10 domineering and burning suns turned to 10 fist-sized golden balls of flame that revolved rhythmically around Zhuomo's body. Having just killed Wu Yu, Zhua Mo was at his peak. His mind was completely clear, the 10-crow celestial domain seemed to be a part of his body and moved to his thoughts. Looking at the fierce battlefield under him, fighting spirit burned inside Zhua Mo and rampaged. The anti-dragon claw on his back seemed to detect his raised spirits and vibrated lightly. A layer of gold overlaid over Zhuomo's vision. The air rushing past him cut like knives, but he was unaffected. Looking at the ground coming towards him, he suddenly spread his arms wide. Boom! The 10 suns revolving around his body sounded at the same time. They spun rapidly and increased in speed. The dark red space expanded outwards, pulled by the revolutions of the 10 suns. In a blink, Zhua Mo seemed to be smashing towards the ground like a ball of furious dark red flames. The U Frontier Guards paled. Xiao Mo guess target was the U Frontier Guard ranks. Protect the Lord. Panicked voices sounded in waves. The U Frontier Guards immediately panicked. The boom in the air seemed to sound inside their minds. The ground under their feet shook. They looked over in shock. The dark red flow that roared had rushed towards them, seeming to increase in size. They almost suffocated from the pressure. Humph! A faint sound came from the chariot and a tall figure appeared in front of the U Frontier Guards. No one knew how he came to appear there, but when this figure entered the field of view, everyone had the same 2 words appear on their minds. Marshal Yu. Marshal Yu was finally personally taking action. Faint blue long hair swayed in the wind. His features seemed to be carved from stone. His eyes were a faint blue. There was a faint smile on his lips and he seemed to exude a strange charisma. This was Marshal Yu. Having already reached martial level, he was one of the strongest in the 100 Savage realm, someone that countless people revered and respected. Marshal Yu raised his head and his expression was normal, as though that terrifying dark red ball of flame did not exist. Just as everyone's attention was focused on this great battle, no one noticed that Luo Li, who had been lying beside Xiao Gua and Li Yingfeng, had silently stood up. There was a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. Then his figure started to fade as though he was disappearing into the void. Beside him, a beautiful figure seemed to materialize. A peerlessly beautiful face slowly became clear. She opened her eyes. Marshal Yu. Zhuo Mo's pupils contracted, but at this time, he was at his peak. He did not feel any terror. That great and motionless figure below stimulated his fighting spirit to burn brighter. Come. The 10 suns moved even faster and Zhuo Mo's mind became even clearer. His eyes were tightly locked onto Marshal Yu and did not move away. As the distance between them closed, an imperceptible look of shock flashed through Marshal Yu's eyes. Now was the time. Zhuo Mo's figure seemed to oppose the rules of the world and suddenly came to a complete halt in the air. There was no buffer between the extreme high-speed movement and the extreme stillness. His position was extremely strange, his chest and abdomen sucked in, his body bowed like a bow. His spread arms were brought together in front of his body. Kill. His forehead suddenly lit up. A golden energy rippled across his face. The golden flames suddenly shrunk into the center like they were grabbed by an invisible hand. A golden pillar that was about 7 zhang thick smashed towards Marshal Yu at an astounding speed. The 10 golden crows on the pillar were all at different positions. The golden crow battering ram. Unlike the loud noise just now, the golden pillar was silent when it moved as though it was intangible. Marshal Yu's pupils suddenly contracted. A thread of a smile appeared on his lips. Good attack. He reached out with his right hand and pushed towards the golden pillar descending from the sky. Hiss. A strange howl filled the air. The people on the ground feel a strong suction force come from the sky that caused them to almost trip and fall. All of them jumped in fright and steadied themselves. Air flashed across their bodies and gathered in the sky. They almost thought they were inside a windstorm. If they were watching from the sky, they could see it more clearly. The air from a radius of 100 li around Marshal Yu's raised right hand was gathering. If one looked from afar, they would see it was a great funnel. The power of one martial level attack was this powerful. Zhu Ku and the others had pale faces. They had been shocked by Lin Qian's sword strike, but right now, they found that the distance between general and martial level was unable to be crossed. Compared to Marshal Yu's blow, Lin Qian's sword strike was like a firefly compared to the moon. There was an innate difference between the two's power. Those that were less brave felt their knees weaken and almost sank to the ground. Zhuo Mo did not know what other people were thinking. At this moment, his mind was completely clear and unaffected. He also saw the power of Marshal Yu's attack, but he wasn't afraid at all. He felt excited. Unusually excited. Martial level. So this was martial level. His calm eyes was filled with the light of excitement and determination. His hands pressed together and the Mo matrices lit up on the golden pillar. The 10 golden crows became even brighter in color and the golden pillar seemed to slow down as though it was moving through water. Marshal Yu had not thought that Zhuo Mo would have transformation to the attack at this time. He could not disguise his shock this time. Zhuo Mo could not maintain his calm. This was his strongest move. His mind was excited and he could not help but shout soundlessly. Go, Golden Crow Battering Ram. Chapter 645 Life-Death Lock Separation Sword Clang. A thick deep sound seemed to burst in people's minds. With a deep rumbling, it passed through their bodies and numbed their extremities. The hair on their bodies stood on end. Time seemed to stop in this moment. The Golden Crow Battering Ram stopped 20 zhang away from Marshal Yu's head. Pia, a crack suddenly appeared on the glittering surface of the Golden Crow Battering Ram. Then several more appeared, crack crack crack, cracks quickly spread across the surface of the Golden Crow Battering Ram. Boom! The Golden Crow Battering Ram suddenly gave off a blinding light. As it exploded, a domineering and burning presence exploded. At the same time, a sharp light flashed across Marshal Yes' eyes. His upraised right hand pushed up again. The collision of two great powers was like two meteors crashing together. The light was as bright as that of a sun. The air within hundreds of li roared and raged with turbulent gales. Everyone staring at the clash only saw a blinding white light. The thundering explosion caused their ears to ring, and the world seemed silent. However, they could not hear anything clearly. Many people reflexively gaped in horror. Those that were more powerful and skilled forced themselves to calm down. They detected the incoming danger. A shock wave rushed at them like a steel wall. Bam bam bam. The MO that met it first were unable to react before they seemed to be launched with a heavy hammer. They threw up blood as their bodies were thrown back. The terrifying wave of air was unstoppable. The elite U Frontier Guard forces were like dry branches tossed in the wind and unable to resist at all. Zhu Ku and the others changed expression. They shielded the princesses as they retreated. Those that were slower to react and were swept away by the wave of air. It was alright if they escaped with the momentum of the terrifying power. Some people wanted to use their strength to steady themselves. Cracks sounded. For these people the bones inside their body could not withstand such a strong power and shattered. It was like the apocalypse had come. Everyone was stunned. Their minds were shook and their faces ashen. The power of one attack left all of them were stunned. No one noticed that a light ethereal figure marched against the gust of air, against the flow of people. The steely wave of air was like tofu in front of this beautiful figure. It did not cause any obstruction for her. Like a nimble fish, her body shook and she burrowed into the wave of air. Marshal Yu narrowed his eyes. His right hand that was now placed behind his back was trembling slightly. He was extremely shocked. Ever since he had reached martial level he had not fought, no one dared to. In the 100 Savage of the Dark, martial level existences were the apex. Even though he focused more time on other affairs, he had not neglected his own cultivation. He actually felt a threat of pressure from Xiao Mo Ge's attack. If it wasn't that his right hand was still uncontrollably trembling, he would not believe this reality. 10 Crow Celestial Domain. Was it really that powerful? He felt uncertain. In front of a marshal, the domain of a general level should not be a threat at all. But why did Xiao Mo Ge's 10 Crow Celestial Domain make him feel pressured? Was it because of Shen power? As the thought flashed through Marshal Ye's mind, his eyes lit up. It definitely was Shen power. The light and the gusts of air did not affect him at all. He remained motionless in the air like rock. He raised his head to look at the black dot in the sky. A smile came to the corner of his mouth. Compared to Marshal Ye's barely ruffled appearance, Zhua Mo was left in a much sorrier state after the clash. Smoke wafted off of him and his clothing was in tatters. Large and small wounds covered his body. The dark red light around him was dim and the 10 suns seemed to have lost their glow. The attack just now didn't just drain all of his power, it had caused him significant injuries. His face was pale and the sun script on his forehead was dim. The light from the other 9 sun scripts were also gone. Without the 10 suns absorbing the Shen power was left completely unchecked. It now rampaged through his body. Zhua Mo forced down the blood that rose to his throat and stared coldly at Marshal Yu. You are the only one I have ever seen to have such presence at general level, Marshal Yu said idly. His tone was filled with praise. Zhua Mo did not speak. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but he was unable to. His body seemed to be boiling right now. The Shen power rampaged through his body, and the attack just now had actually caused a crack to appear in the seal on the Sun Crystal Seed. At the battlefield of sealed extinction, the ancient corpse had said that Zhua Mo wasn't able to absorb the power of the Sun Crystal Seed because it was too powerful, and he would even be wounded, so the corpse had sealed the seed's power. Xuemo had never expected the attack just now would cause a crack to appear in the Sun Crystal Seed seal. A hot flow that almost melted him slowly escaped from the Sun Crystal Seed. This hot flow was minuscule, but once it appeared, the messy Shen power inside Xuemo's body suddenly quieted. It was the first time Xuemo had ever encountered a situation where his Shen power would stop moving. A strange feeling rose. At this time, an extremely vicious and icy flow suddenly flowed along his back and into his body. Xuemo's expression changed slightly and his heart skipped a beat. Anti-Dragon Claw. Damn it, at such an important time, the rebellious Anti-Dragon Claw actually came out to meddle. The 3,000 threads of worry did not move at all. No matter how Xuemo tried, it didn't seem to be able to do anything against this icy flow. Martial Yu slowly flew up until he was at the same height as Xuemo. He looked wryly at the motionless Xuemo and said idly, "What? You only have the power for one attack. It is not realistic to think that you can defeat me with this one attack." His eyes were sharp and he could see that it was a mess inside Xuemo's body. Not just fighting, Xuemo didn't even have the power to move a finger right now. Martial Yu smiled faintly. His hand spread and he grasped at Xuemo. The air around Xuemo suddenly solidified. Xuemo was unable to move. Having captured the other alive, Martial Yu was in a much better mood. Xiao Mo Gu cultivated Shen power, but he was far weaker in terms of power. He only had the power for one attack. Thinking of the gains this time, he disregarded his losses. With the Shen power cultivation method in hand, he would have a chance at a breakthrough. More importantly, with Shen power, he would have the hope of breaking into king level. King level. These two words caused his mind to heat up. He wanted to return immediately and study Shen power. But he was a martial and he had strong self-control, so he repressed the impulse. He smiled and then pulled his hand back. Xuemo's figure flew towards Martial Yu. Xuemo immediately panicked. At this time, a serene singing voice seemed to come from the unseen ground. Why is life a joy, why is death a sorrow, two hearts separated by yin and yang, bound together by a chain? Countless sword lights blossomed. In a flash, there was a sea of them. They seemed to materialize out of nowhere. They budded, bloomed, and then withered at a stunning rate. A beautiful and cool figure stood like a sword in the sea of flowers. When Xuemo saw the newcomer, he was startled. And then he reacted. It was Luo Li Shidi's sword spirit. Had Luo Li Shidi woken up? In this moment, Xuemo was filled with joy. Luo Li's awakening meant that he had comprehended the life-death lock. In the sea of flowers, Wu Li's figure was as cool as a sword, but that added to her charisma. Where was Luo Li Shidi? Xuemo could not see Luo Li anywhere and was slightly puzzled. But then he started to panic. Even if Luo Li Shidi had comprehended the life-death lock, he definitely was not a match for Martial Yu. Damn it! He was going to suffer great losses in business this time. Xuemo did not have any of the fighting spirit he had previously. He wanted to gather his power to tell Luo Li Shidi to run. But his body did not move. It was completely out of his control and he couldn't make a sound. Martial Yu was slightly shocked. You have some skill. These beautiful flowers were made from countless sword essences. Layered together, it was like a beautiful sea of flowers. Flower Sea Sword Domain. He smiled dismissively. Inside, he pondered the origins of this Xiao Mo Gu. His subordinates were astounding. But then he realized a thought. Xiao Mo Gu was in his hands. If he did not willingly submit, then he could set a Jinji in the other. Martial Yu did not fear that Xiao Mo Gu would rebel. As to these powerful subordinates of Xiao Mo Gu, they would naturally now belong to him. When he thought of this, his mood became even better. The sword essence sea in front of him became even more joyful to look at. Woli floated in the middle of the sword sea and looked at Marshal Yu with a cool and clear gaze. She suddenly closed her eyes and her lips moved. Life-death lock separation sword. Marshal Yu's heart jumped and a feeling of danger rose. Pia, a flower suddenly shattered. As the petals fell, a tiny red chain was pulled out of the flower and each of the petals and lengthened. The sea of flowers shattered. The red chains crisscrossed and layered over one another. In a flash, countless red chains of varying thickness winded back and forth like a sea of red snakes. The red chains shot at Marshal Yu at a stunning speed. What was strangest was that these chains were completely made from sword essence. And this strange sword essence that was not living or dead, nor yin or yang. Even Marshal Yu, who had seen many things, had never seen such a strange sword essence before. What sword essence was this? The underestimation and dismissal that Marshal Yu held before was swept away. His expression became grave. This sword essence was extremely strange. He had a strong feeling if he came into contact with these sword essences, the outcome would not be good. He could not say why this was. This presence that was not living nor dead, and between yin and yang was a strange existence that seemed to waver between life and death. He detected danger. Chapter 646, Chained Together. It really was strange. How long had it been since he had felt danger? Danger, ever since he stepped into martial level, this word seemed to be unconnected to him. When the presence of danger came at him, even he blanked for a moment. However, Marshal Yu quickly reacted. With a high hum, a sharp green sword light penetrated the sea of flowers and flew into his hands. The long green sword was narrow and carved with ancient scripts. This was not a flying sword that Shuzhe used, but a Mo weapon, Mo sword. With the sword in his hand, all of Marshal Yu's hesitation and uncertainty was swept away. The sword in his hand was called the Green Carp Tongue Sword, and was one of his Mo weapons. It was ranked above the Black Heart treasure coins. The Green Carp Tongue Sword had been obtained after he had killed an enemy back when he was a general. At the beginning, its quality was average, and paled in comparison from its power today. He had tried all the ways he could think of, refining it with all kinds of methods available to him. Its power continued to increase, and it jumped into the ranks of Earth Mo weapons to become one of the most famous Mo weapons of the present era. The Green Carp Tongue Sword was forged from the tongue of a rotten carp Mo. The rotten carp Mo was a kind of Mo that lived deep in the sea. Their strongest organ was their green tongues, which were hard and sharp, able to pierce through any object. After their death, the only part that would not rot was their green tongue. That was how the name of their clan came to be. The Green Carp Tongue Sword slashed at the flower sea, split into. The sky full of red chains decayed when touched by the green light. The green light flashed, and a deep and black fissure appeared in the sky. A sword that could rend space. A dark and rotten presence came from the crack. The flora that still remained on the ground quickly withered. The sea of flowers quickly wilted and withered. In a flash, the endless sea of flowers became dried and withered branches. The most important reason the Green Carp Tongue Sword was able to rank among the Earth Mo weapons was that it could rend apart space. Marshal Yu had found an ancient jinji from the remnants of a record. It was able to rend space and connect to rotten jia, and the most important material to forge this jinji was the tongue of a rotten carp Mo. For an expert like Marshal Yu, once the crux was identified, everything else wasn't a problem to figure out. The Green Carp Tongue Sword was forged according to this method. The rotten jia was a strange land. It wasn't large, but was filled with monsters. What was most famous was the unique miasma there. It had yin and corrosive properties. It was one of the greatest poisons in the world. It was even troublesome for marshals if they came into contact with it. If one was weaker than martial level, they would be immediately killed. As the corrosive miasma flooded out of the crack in space, Wali's sword essence flower sea quickly withered. Those tiny red chain links quickly melted like snow under the sun. Wally's calm gaze didn't change, as though what was happening was within her predictions. She bent down to touch the withered flowers, and sang in a clear voice, "Life not life, death not death, my heart will not separate." The dried flowers on the ground suddenly started to absorb the rotten miasma. In a flash, it seemed to have taken in nutrients and bloomed again. The flowers that had absorbed the corrosive miasma became even brighter, and the red chains that had melted took form again, this time with rainbow-colored marks scattered throughout. A sweet taste filled the air. "Interesting," Marshal Yu said with a change in his expression. In his view, this astounding change was extraordinary. As a marshal, he had better judgment than other experts. With a glance, he saw that Wally's cultivation was a strange one related to life and death. This surprised him. Life and death was one of the most profound and eternal questions. A method with life and death as the core principle was always cryptic and difficult to cultivate. But any method that dared to use the principle of life and death was always a powerful one. He recognized the danger and became cautious. The other's presence was very strange. She brimmed with life, but it seemed to have been drawn and transformed from death energy. There were two completely opposite presences, life and death, on her. This strange state meant that he was unable to accurately gauge the other's strength. Marshal Yu understood. The corrosive miasma would not threaten this mysterious woman, it would only become fertilizer for the sea of flowers. The corrosive miasma was a kind of death energy formed after decaying. The other had the ability to turn life to death, and change death to life. The sea of flowers rippled and sword essence moved. Suddenly, many slender chains appeared at Marshal Yu's feet and wrapped tightly around him. Marshal Yu snorted coldly. The chain around his legs immediately flew apart. Yet at this time, the sea of flowers started to slowly spin with Wally as the center. The sea of flowers was becoming an enormous whirlpool. Clank! The sound of an enormous chain sounded. A great chain slowly rose from under her feet. With every movement upwards, there was the sound of the chain trembling. The chain was thicker than an adult arm. It was completely black and covered with red MO matrices. Marshal Yu's expression was grave, and he threw the green carp-tongue sword into the air. When the green carp-tongue sword flew into the sky, it turned into a slender green carp. Suddenly, a burst of thunder sounded, and electrical snakes danced. Rain droplets poured down. The curtain of rain covered the world as mist spread. These droplets of rain seemed gentle, yet the sea of flowers suddenly slowed under the great rain. Marshal Yes, rain domain of no return. Each rain droplet contained great power, and was so sharp it could penetrate armor. The ground immediately became riddled in holes. However, while the sea of flowers slowed in its spinning under the rain domain of no return, it was still blooming brightly. Wally looked indifferently at Marshal Yu as the chain slowly rose from behind her back. If Marshal Yu could enter the sea of flowers, he would find that under Wally's feet, at the other end of the sea of flowers, there was a transparent figure, Luo Li. He was standing at the other end of the sea of flowers, the chain moving down from his back. Chain together. This move was called, chain together. Zhua Mo didn't have the time to pay attention to the fight. The situation inside his body was the strangest at this time. That thread of hot flow from the sun crystal seed immediately intimidated the Shen power that had messed up his body like a king conquering the world. Yet when the dark and vicious energy of the anti-dragon claw also burrowed into Zhua Mo's body, it was like a furious lion that leapt over. The cold and vicious energy of the anti-dragon claw did not show weakness and welcomed the confrontation. It was like a storm. The two powers were evenly matched as they fought. The Zhua Mo's body became the battlefield for these two presences. For a while, the left side of Zhua Mo's body would be extremely cold while his right side was burning. These two powers were like two monsters inside Zhua Mo's body. Zhua Mo's Shen power didn't dare to move, like a frightened child. Everywhere they passed, his body would be left extremely damaged. Fortunately, Zhuo still had the greenvine mystical water. This droplet of greenvine mystical water was intelligent and it continued to heal Zhuo's body. But the next event caused Zhuo's soul to almost fly out of his body. As though it was stimulated by the anti-dragon claw, more hot flows came from the sun crystal seed, and in response the anti-dragon claw, the peerless weapon, did not back off. Threads of cold and vicious energy continued to burrow into his body from his back. The two sides started to fight intensely again. Zhuo's face was white. Heavens, if they continued, Ge wouldn't have enough greenvine mystical water no matter how much Ge had. If this continued, his body would definitely be ripped apart by these two presences. But what Zhuo hadn't expected was that the hot flows from the sun crystal seed quickly gained the upper hand. It clearly was stronger. Zhuo sighed in relief. If the two continued to fight, he would most likely die quickly. But the following developments caused Zhuo to panic again. The hot flows of the sun crystal seed that had the upper hand left scorched dust behind in its path. Even the greenvine mystical water was unable to repair it. Zhuo understood. The hot flows from the sun crystal seed were not something his body could tolerate right now. Compared to the present situation, the previous situation when the two sides had been evenly matched was much better. Little give a bit more cold energy, a little bit more. Zhuo furiously thought of ways to help. But the cold energy didn't increase, and were being destroyed by the sun crystal seed. Zhuo, who had been praying furiously, saw this and was enraged. Useless person. You couldn't even defeat an immature fireball, you Sky Missouri weapon my ass. Zhuo swore inside. When he thought this, the anti-dragon claw on his back suddenly vibrated furiously. It seemed to have heard Zhuo's curses. A vast vicious presence that was many times stronger than before furiously charged into Zhuo's body as though it was furious. The 3,000 threads of worry seemed to detect that this was a crucial time, and had loosened its restraint on the anti-dragon claw. This burst of energy from the anti-dragon claw was extremely strong. When it charged into Zhuo's body, it scattered the hot flows from the sun crystal seed. Zhuo felt the anti-dragon claw continue to tremble on his back. Zhuo seemed to have a feeling that the anti-dragon claw was a brawny large man that was now roaring smugly with laughter. But Zhuo didn't cheer and almost wailed. The presence of the anti-dragon claw had scattered the hot flows of the sun crystal seed and was now rampaging through his body. The vicious killing intent was now also rapidly destroying his body. Damn it! Zhuo wanted to cry. Luckily, the sun crystal seed was unable to tolerate defeat, and another burning flow of heat came out of the crack and leaped towards the vicious energies of the anti-dragon claw. The two forces teetered back and forth. Zhuo's body became the battlefield where the two forces fought a tug-of-war. All kinds of great pain tortured Zhuo's nerves, but he was unable to move or cry out. In front of these two great vicious things, Zhuo was so minuscule he was an infant. But he did not give up. Even if it was painful to his bones, he gritted his teeth and maintained his calm to focus his attention. He knew that if he was to find a way to survive the battle of these two great and viscous forces, he had to be calm. He didn't remember what time it was, just as Zhuo was becoming numb. A chance arrived. Chapter 647, Transformation. Nothing could rival the brutal presence of the anti-dragon claw, not even the wasteland beast that Zhuo could summon using the archaic wasteland sacrificial art. But this brutal presence was nothing compared to its power in the past. According to Pu Yao and Wei, the anti-dragon claw had been weakened for thousands of years by the 3,000 threads of worry. This caused Zhuo to desire and admire what presence the anti-dragon claw had in the past. The brutal energies of the anti-dragon claw furiously flooded into Zhuo's body. The sun crystal seed was stimulated by this. A thick, almost tangible, flow of heat poured out from the crack as it slowly advanced. One was an unparalleled ancient and vicious object, the other was a great treasure of the world, one cold, one hot. When the two forces came into contact, it was like cold water poured into hot oil. In front of these two terrifying powers, Zuomo's steel-hard Mo physique that was fragile as paper. In a flash, it was covered in holes. If it wasn't for the greenvine mystical water's healing properties, he would have already turned to dust long ago. But as the battle heated up, the positions of the two sides steadied and they gathered near each of the 10 sun matrices on Zuomo's body. These 10 sun matrices of the 10 crow celestial apparatus Mo physique were naturally attuned to the sun crystal seed and acted as wells where Shen power naturally gathered. The sun crystal seed's power flowed into the 10 Mo matrices as a result. Taking advantage of this, the cold and brutal energies of the anti-dragon claw quickly took over all of Zuomo's body and started to furiously attack these 10 sun Mo matrices. If someone was to touch Zuomo's body now, they would find to their shock that his entire body was freezing, but the 10 sun Mo matrices burned like hot metal. As the battle intensified, even the Shen power in Zuomo's sealed right hand was attracted and entered this great battle. Zuomo himself was left extremely weak. The powers inside his body rampaged out of control. His body was a mess and heavily injured. Yet at this moment, Zuomo found a chance. There was another power in Zuomo's body that he had always forgot, the soul-setting divine light. This divine light came from wise succession. Other than placing Jinji in Guming Gong, Zuomo had never used it again. It was not that Zuomo had a low opinion of its power, but the succession of the soul-setting divine light was too ancient and too difficult to understand. Even Wei could not speak of the specifics. The divine light itself was strange and Zuomo didn't even know where to begin studying it. What he had not expected was that the soul-setting divine light slowly emerged out of the 3,000 threads of worry during this moment of great danger. These two terrifying powers, 3,000 threads of worry in the soul-setting divine light, had not destroyed each other. Zuomo was not surprised about the 3,000 threads of worry. Something that could restrain the anti-dragon claw had to be a treasure on par with the anti-dragon claw. This divine light that originated from the dawn of the world also was unaffected. Zuomo immediately realized that the soul-setting divine light was a treasure on the same level as the anti-dragon claw and the sun crystal seed. When the soul-setting divine light burrowed out of the 3,000 threads of worry, it slowly swam like a rainbow fish in Zuomo's torn-up body. Forced to desperate straits, Zuomo's heart jumped when he discovered the soul-setting divine light. Opportunity. Right now, all other powers in his body were completely suppressed by the sun crystal seed and the anti-dragon claw, so he could not use them. The 3,000 threads of worry were not suppressed, but because of the uniqueness of its power, it was of no help in this battle. The sudden discovery of the soul-setting divine light was akin to a life-saving herb to Zuomo. Zuomo immediately controlled his emotions and pushed down the joy and excitement he felt. He thought back to how he had previously activated the soul-setting divine light. As expected, when his thoughts shifted, the soul-setting divine light immediately stopped where it was. Zuomo was joyed. It seemed that he could control the soul-setting divine light. Given his present helplessness, a power that he could control was what he needed the most. Even if this power was tiny, he would not give it up. A power that he could control meant that he did not have to wait for his fate to be determined by others. He carefully controlled the soul-setting divine light. Because it had been too long since he had used it, and he wasn't familiar to start with, his control was extremely crude at first. Zuomo was not demotivated. He usually seemed to be uncaring, but the more dangerous the moment, the clearer his mind was and the more patience he had. The conflict between the sun crystal seed and the anti-dragon claw reached a white-hot level. The burning flow that poured out from the sun crystal seed continued to flood into the 10 sun Mo matrices. The 10 sun Mo matrices were quickly filled up. They were filled with power like 10 balls of flame. Because the power that was added was too strong, the MO matrices were completely awakened. The awakened MO matrix actually concealed its light. The burning heat turned to darkness. Light and dark, they were twins. Zhuo seemed to understand when he saw this scene. The power in every Sun MO matrix far surpassed the limits of what the MO matrix could tolerate. If there was no outside force that reduced the power, the Sun MO matrix would not be able to tolerate the overflow and would explode. It would only end up in one way for Zhuo, dying in an explosion of blood and gore. Fortunately, there was the anti-dragon claw. The cold and brutal energy of the anti-dragon claw surrounded the 10 sun matrices from all directions. The stimulated sun crystal seed realized that the sun matrices was a battlefield where it held the advantage. There, held the home ground advantage. If it caused these sun matrices to explode, then it would undoubtedly lose this advantage. Therefore, the sun matrices were simulated on a path that's what Mo never thought about. Evolution. The power of the sun crystal seed flooded every part of the sun matrix. The power that was several levels above the sun Mo matrix repeatedly cleansed the Mo matrix, causing it to change. Like grass sprouting, the complex Mo matrix silently grew. It was the first time Mo observed the growth of a Mo matrix. The anti-dragon claw is also intelligent. It responded to the transformation of the sun Mo matrix. A layer of frost appeared on Mo in the areas around the sun matrix. This layer of frost was not white or blue, but a faint gray. A portion of the anti-dragon claw's brutal energy started to heal Mo's almost ground-up flesh. Yet the anti-dragon claw's icy power was too brutal. Even if it was trying to heal, it felt like thousands of little icy knives cutting repeatedly into Mo's flesh. Mo endured the heart-boring pain as he carefully controlled the soul-setting divine light. He hid it in a corner and waited patiently for a chance. He realized that this moment was not the best time to act. The sun crystal seed and the anti-dragon claw were all accumulating power. The following clash would most likely be even more intense than before. Mo's Mo physique was sturdy, but in front of something as vicious as the anti-dragon claw, it was not enough. Large amounts of blood and flesh disappeared like melting snow in front of the brutal energies, leaving only the blood and flesh that could absorb the brutal energy. This led to a process in which Mo's blood and flesh was completely transformed. The strongest flesh quickly expanded and thrived, the weakest rapidly shrank and died. They continued to struggle in the ocean of brutal energy and gradually stabilized. No one noticed that a gray Mo matrix had appeared inside Mo's body, and it was slowly growing, creeping across his body like ivy. The gray Mo matrices were completely different than the Mo matrices he had before. Some dense scales appeared on the edges of the Mo matrix. If one looked closely, they would find that these fine scales were extremely similar in color and shape to the scales of the anti-dragon claw, but much smaller. The heavy brutal energy filled the space one zhang around Mo and seemed to be one with the anti-dragon claw. But outside of this one zhang, the presence of the energy was completely absent, not allowing anyone present to detect it. Everyone's gaze was deeply attracted to the battle between Marshal Yu and Wu Li. Chained together. Wu Li's slender fingers pointed at Marshal Yu. Her cool gaze contained determination and fighting spirit. Under the sea of flowers, Luo Li was reflected. While his body was transparent, there was a smile at the corner of his mouth. Almost at the same time, the two of them spoke. Wu Li's voice was cool and as hard as a sword, together. Luo Li's voice was a murmur and gentle as water, together. Whoosh, a thick chain suddenly flew out from under Wu Li's feet like an ancient snake that shot at Marshal Yu. The air was filled with the sound of the chain clanking. The whole of the flower sea was trembling. A strange presence that was hard to describe moved into the surroundings as the chain clanked. This was. Zhu Ke's expression was uncertain. This is. The middle-aged attendant exclaimed, but she suddenly stopped as her face became completely bloodless. Xia suddenly raised his head. His breathing was so heavy it could be heard clearly through the thick armor. This was the presence of life and death. Marshal Ye's eyes were filled with shock and gravity. This snake-like metal chain was made from two opposing powers, life and death. If he was not seeing it with his own eyes, he would not believe it. Life and death, two diametrically opposed powers, yet they were merged together so beautifully. It really was fantastical. What method was this? Who was that woman? Countless thoughts flashed through his mind, but in a moment, his mind became clear again. This chain that was woven from life and death was one of the highest powers that he had ever seen. It was so exquisite, so fantastical, it was hard to believe. As a marshal, even Marshal Yu sighed and praised it. But such an exquisite and creative power still had weaknesses. It was not condensed enough. The others should have just comprehended it a short time ago. Even though they had understood to the crux of the ability, they lacked practice and the power was too weak. It was akin to a very powerful seedling. Maybe it would be powerful when it matured, but the seedling that had just germinated was thin and delicate. Power came from methods, but also from an accumulation of experience. Compared to this method of life and death that was undoubtedly a top skill, Marshal Yu did not have anything like that. But in terms of accumulation, the other was far lacking. He had never thought that he would be forced to such a state by such a young woman. Marshal Yu smiled, full of self-scorn. However, someone that could comprehend such a wondrous method was qualified to be his opponent. The smile on his face gradually faded away. His expression became solemn and devout as he raised the green carp-tongue sword. The countless hardship and obstacles on his path of cultivation flashed past his mind's eye. His mind suddenly broadened. A figure stood with a sword under a drizzle of rain. I will let you see the true power of this martial levels, rain domain of no return. Chapter 648, No Return. The feeling of extreme hot and cold mixing together made him want to throw up blood. But Sui Mo did not have the time to throw up blood. He was furiously learning how to manipulate the soul-setting divine light. Learning as he went was not something that he wanted to do, but he had no choice at this time. The soul-setting divine light was his lifeboat. Other than this, he had nothing else to respond with. The soul-setting divine light, the light that accompanied the dawn of the world. It was like a little multicolored fish, sometimes obedient and sometimes mischievous. Regardless of the urgencies Mo felt, he could only calm down and experience it. This was a multicolored world. All kinds of colored light were gathered in this extremely slender divine light. The birth of all colors of light when the world had began were included in this little divine light. It was not of the five elements, nor did it belong to yin or yang, and had nothing to do with Yao, Mo, and Xiuzhe. When Zhuo Mo's mind was immersed in the soul-setting divine light, an ocean of chaotic information followed him. What was most attention-catching was an ancient presence that struck at his mind. In this moment, he seemed to see the primordial chaos, the dawn of the world. He knew that this was an illusion. The soul-setting divine light might have a sliver of an ancient presence, but much of it had disappeared after being passed down for so many years. It would be good if just 0.1% remained. Just how much information was at the dawn of the world? Could a divine light hold all that? But even this 0.1% was precious enough. The dawn of the world was the beginning of all methods. Just comprehending a little bit would be of endless benefit. On this, no matter if the person was Yao, Mo, or Xiuzhe, they were all the same. Zhuo Mo did not have any methods of comprehending this presence from the dawn of the world. Even if it was the core of all methods, even if it was the most precious part of the soul-setting divine light. In such an emergency, wasn't trying to comprehend it just seeking death. The practical little Mo Gu was furiously pondering the use of the divine light, and how to manipulate the divine light. Under the threat of death, a person's potential would be more easily uncovered. Zhuemo actually understood a bit more of the soul-setting divine light that usually was so hard to understand. The most powerful ability of the soul-setting divine light was setting. It could set everything in the world, and this was the reason for its name. Zhuemo could not understand the reason, but this was not a time to study the reason. It was fine as long as he knew how to use it. Zhuemo used the soul-setting divine light to sweep a tiny bit of the brutal energy of the anti-dragon claw. As he had expected, this vicious energy froze where it was. This caused Zhuemo's confidence to rise. He tested it on a tiny hot flow from the sun crystal seed. It also was a success. He suppressed the impulse he felt and patiently waited for an opportunity. The soul-setting divine light was a wonder, but this fragment of soul-setting divine light was extremely small. Zhuemo suspected that it would not be able to set a great deal of power. It could only be used at a critical moment, an important place. The MO matrix was growing and changing. He knew that this was the MO matrix evolving. Zhuemo's body was being rapidly changed and strengthened by the two enemy powers even if he was not willing. At this time, Zhuemo was like an experienced hunter. He had already found the weakness, and right now, he only had to wait patiently for a chance to deliver a fatal strike. The evolution of the MO matrix was very fast. The sun scripts were completely changed. 10 lifelike suns floated on the surface of Zhuemo's body. They were like suns embedded in Zhuemo's body, especially the sun at his forehead. It was like a miniature sun that revolved without end. The number of paths between the 10 suns had multiplied several times. It was profound and complex as the paths crossed. If someone slightly weaker looked at them, they would find they would become dizzy. The dense scales that had been near Zhuemo's MO matrix had disappeared, and the new MO matrix sank under his skin so that it could not be seen. But someone familiar with Zhuemo would notice that his figure had changed slightly. Zhuemo's original figure could not be considered to be brawny, but muscles were clearly defined. Right now, his figure had become much thinner. Only Zhuemo knew that his body was multiple times as strong now. His body had been tempered again. The weak blood and flesh had been eliminated by the vicious energies of the anti-dragon claw. Each bone, every sinew, every muscle, was now multiple times stronger than before. The refinement was even more complete than the time with the shifting star sands. If this had occurred at any other time, Zhuemo would be smiling so wide his eyes would be squinting, but right now, he did not feel any joy. He suspected that the completion of the refinement meant that the final conflict between the two powers was about to start. Zhuemo's guess was correct. Wind blew and there was a fine drizzle of rain. The curtain of rain seemed endless and covered thousands of li. The red threads were clear and transparent with a springy presence. There was no darkness, it was warm and unspeakably comfortable. Under the curtain of rain, those that were weak showed intoxicated expressions. They unconsciously released their MO weapons, dropping them on the ground. The sound of the weapons merged into this drizzle and the owners did not realize they had done so. More and more people released the MO weapons in their hands and became intoxicated in the rain. The MO skill that Qi Diaoyu was most skilled in was illusory sound. He detected the power of this rain and his expression changed. Unconsciously, the water droplets around him sped up. With a sharp howl, it seemed to break through the curtain of rain. The curtain of rain was these same droplets, but the sound of the drizzle was soft and intoxicating. The sharp howl seemed to burrow into the sticky water and then disappeared. The 3 droplets of water seemed to have gotten drunk themselves. They slowed down as they flew until they moved at the speed of a turtle. Qi Diaoyu's face was ashen. For the first time, he felt helplessness. He didn't have any power to fight back. The rain domain of no return. He murmured with a complicated expression. As expected, there is no return. Between the threads of rain, a kind of lazy power unconsciously burrowed into his body. Qi Diaoyu felt his consciousness seemed to move slower, his body became heavier. It felt very comfortable and he did not wanting to move. He showed a strange expression of intoxication. No return, no return. The moment the curtain of rain appeared, the sound of clanking of the chains imperceptibly paused. Then the chain which had charged towards Marshal Yu, like a dragon, seemed to have entered water. An invisible power pressured it from all directions. The metal chain suddenly lit up with a mix of white and black light. The rain shook and the chain sped up. Marshal Yu smiled slightly and dismissed it. The curtain of rain did not change, but the chain that had just sped up quickly slowed down as though it was now pulling something heavy. The black and white lights quickly faded within the rain curtain. In a blink, the black and white lights were consumed. The metal chain that had been so formidable and unstoppable suddenly became slow like a sleeping babe floating in the air. The sword essence flower sea seemed to slow down until it appeared to have stopped. Wally's cool expression finally changed. The domain of a marshal. It was this powerful. This endless rain in front of her was something that could disrupt even the march of life and death. In terms of profoundness of power, the rain domain of no return was lacking compared to the metal chain. However, the power disparity was too large. Luo Li had just comprehended the life and death lock. The time was too short. Marshal Yu had went from colonel to brigadier, to general, and then into marshal level. Each step had been set on a firm foundation and the amount of power he had accumulated was almost unimaginable. When power reached a certain level, it would cause an innate change. No matter how exquisite the together chain was, it wasn't a threat to absolute power. One could defeat 10. This was a weakness. No matter how talented they were, they could not take a shortcut on this path of accumulation. Marshal Yu found their biggest weakness. He smiled faintly. The other side did have talent to force him to such a point. But, this was the end. Just at this time, a shocking ripple came from behind him. His smile froze on his face. Before he could turn around, boom, something seemed to explode behind him. A ripple that almost caused him to lose the urge to fight exploded suddenly from behind him. He turned back to look in shock. A bright sun burned in the rain. Having made their final transformations, the collision between the two powers was intense. The brutal energies of the anti-dragon claw had turned into black serpents that roared as they leapt at the 10 suns. The sun crystal seed that was in complete control of the 10-crow celestial domain suddenly released a burning light. The serpents that came close turned to dust. But there were many of the black serpents that were made from the brutal energies. They continued to move without any care. The battle suddenly entered the most vicious stage. This was a full-scale head-on clash of power. The brutal energies of the serpents charged at the 10 suns like a relentless tide. The 10 suns moved across Suomo's body. The sun crystal seed had actually activated the 10-crow celestial domain in response. Boom! Golden light suddenly came from around Suomo. It was like sun that suddenly bloomed in the rain. Before the rain could come near the golden light, it evaporated. The sun suddenly turned dark. Marshal Yu reflexively raised his head. He saw the blurry sky that had been covered by the rain was now a dark red as though the sky was aflame. The entire sky became dark red, and the area was even larger than his curtain of rain. This was. Suddenly, a dot of light flew out of the golden shield on Xiao Mo's body into the sky. The curtain of rain could not impede the dot of light. It grew as it flew and in a blink, it hung in the sky. A sun. Several more dots of light flew from Suomo's body into the sky. In a flash, 10 suns were spread out in the sky. 10-crow celestial domain. This was the 10-crow celestial domain. Marshal Yu almost didn't believe his own eyes. No matter how powerful the 10-crow celestial domain was, it was only the top dog in general level. Compared to martial domains, it was a whole level below. There was an innate difference in level. How could the 10-crow celestial domain break through his rain domain of no return? This was impossible. Before he could understand everything happening in front of him, an unprecedented feeling of danger rose without any warning. His heart jumped wildly. Chapter 649, Sun Crystal Seeds 10-crow celestial domain. This feeling of danger came without any warning and approached so fast that Marshall Yu wasn't able to react. In truth, he was unable to react. The pressure that the 10-crow celestial domain gave him was suffocating. A strange unfamiliar feeling of suffocation. How long had it been since he felt such pressure? He didn't remember, but he was shocked and intimidated by this strange feeling of pressure. Zhuemo did not know of Marshall Yu's terror and really did not have the attention to spare. He was walking on a tightrope. If he wasn't careful, one stumble and he would fall to his death. In front of the anti-dragon claw and the sun crystal seed, Marshall Yu wasn't worth a mention. He truly felt this. However, Zhuemo felt surprised that the sun crystal seed had activated the 10-crow celestial domain, but he quickly understood. The sun crystal seed most likely had detected the threat of the anti-dragon claw and wanted to use the power of the 10-crow celestial domain to fight against the anti-dragon claw. The power level of the sun crystal seed's 10-crow celestial domain far surpassed his own. The 10-crow celestial domain it activated was far more powerful than normal. Every transformation of the 10-crow celestial domain was activated, even the higher-level transformations were activated as the higher-level power filled it. Zhuemo watched the entire process and didn't dare to divide his attention at all. Even if he was in a dangerous situation right now, the scene in front of him attracted his attention. He could see every change in the 10-crow celestial domain with his own eyes. He paid rapt attention to how the sun crystal seed activated the 10-crow celestial domain. If he paid close attention, then he would be able to know all the transformations of the 10-crow celestial domain. The sun crystal seed was even pointing out the path of progression for the 10-crow celestial domain as well. Zhuemo greedily watched the changes of the 10-crow celestial domain under the control of the sun crystal seed. At this time, the sun crystal seed was the best teacher. No matter if it was the sun crystal seed or the anti-dragon claw, they seemed to have intelligence on level of a person. The anti-dragon claw detected the sun crystal seed's intentions. A vast murderousness immediately filled the space. The rain drizzle of the rain domain of no return suddenly froze under such a heavy murderousness. The rain domain of no return was as fragile as glass. Countless little gray wisps of killing essence swam between the frozen raindrops. Cold and vast, brutal and savage, like a vicious beast baring its fangs and glaring at its prey with its crimson-red eyes. It easily tore apart the layers of defenses and charged into people's minds with little to no resistance. The people affected felt endless terror come as a wave sweeping their legs out from under them and immediately swallowed them. Bam! A clear and pleasing shattering sound echoed. The rain domain of no return only lasted for a few breaths under the attack of the anti-dragon claw before it collapsed. Marshall Yu's face paled. The rain domain of no return had been defeated and he had been wounded by the backlash of power. His eyes were filled with terror. He looked at the wave of murderousness that seemed to be a great gray monster howling and fell into a daze. Anti-dragon claw. Was this the true power of the Sky Missouri weapon, the anti-dragon claw? Suddenly, he felt he was so minuscule, as tiny and insignificant as dust. Ambition, pride, it was like a beautiful bubble that popped. His face was ashen and his eyes dim. However, he was at martial level. The murderousness had momentarily stunned him, but he had the power to fight back. The MO skill in his body detected danger and started to circulate on its own. His body suddenly shook, his face paling even more, but his calm expression gradually fought its way back from terror. Though there was still shock on his face, his eyes had cleared up. So risky. The danger just now had been greater than any of his fights. Marshall Yu looked with lingering fear at Xiao Mo Gu, whose figure was shrouded in golden light in the sky. Inside that blinding ball of golden light was a grey pillar of energy that shot into the sky. That was the anti-dragon claw. Anti-dragon claw, a Sky Missouri weapon. Only now did he truly understand the meaning of these 6 words. He finally understood only those martial level and above could tame the anti-dragon claw. Marshal Yu suddenly smiled in self-disdain. Previously, he had thought of how to subduing the anti-dragon claw. Now, he finally understood how laughable his thoughts were. There were many sayings about the anti-dragon claw, but everyone believed one, only martial level and above could subdue them. But after personally seeing the anti-dragon claw, Marshal Yu immediately understood that this saying was not complete. It was not martial level or above that could tame them, but above martial level. Other than the power of a martial, one also had to have the appropriate emo skill. Something as brutal as the anti-dragon claw would only be tamed by those bloodthirsty and battle-hungry. Otherwise, even if one had the power of a martial, they would be shattered by the killing essence of the anti-dragon claw. Understanding this bewilderment flashed across Marshal Ye's mind. Even he was unable to withstand the killing essence of the anti-dragon claw. Theoretically, Xiao Mo Gu should have ground to dust. But Xiao Mo Gu was unharmed in the air. Also, the power contained in the golden light was different but terrifying in the same way. What was that? Was that another Sky Missouri weapon? This thought flashed through Marshal Ye's head, but he immediately felt it was absurd. It was the greatest of fortunes to encounter one Sky Missouri weapon like the anti-dragon claw. How unlikely would it be for someone to possess 2 at once? Marshal Yu was the strongest person on the battlefield and his perception was also the strongest of all the people. He quickly found that the target of the anti-dragon claw's attack as not him but seemed to be that ball of golden light and the 10-crow celestial domain. Marshal Yu felt curious and happy, and also a thread of lingering fear. If the target of the anti-dragon claw had been him, then now. This guess caused him to shudder. Boom boom boom. The conflict between the anti-dragon claw and the sun crystal seed became even more intense. The 10-crow celestial domain had reached its strongest state. The great power created by the revolution of the 10 suns had formed a golden pillar of fire in the sky and shot at Swa Mo and the anti-dragon claw. The anti-dragon claw that had possession of 9/10 of Swa Mo's body did not show weakness. The gray Mo matrix appeared again on Swa Mo's body. A faint gray light suddenly appeared around Swa Mo and shielded him. The black shadow of a dragon flickered inside the gray shield of light. When the pillar of fire came into contact with the gray shield, it struck the surface and was deflected off. Sparks flew and rained down. Vroom! The 10 suns in the air seemed to be infuriated and the light intensified. Countless streams of dark fire appeared in the dark red sky. The sky was like a river, and the flames like water. The golden pillar of light became even brighter. The thick pillar of light started to shrink and condense until it almost solidified. The croaks of crows suddenly resounded in the sky and out of each sun came a crow shrouded in flame. When the 10 golden crows flew out, they turned into 10 streams of light that entered the golden pillar. It was as though cold water was suddenly poured onto the golden pillar and it froze. 10 golden crows appeared on the pillar in different lifelike positions. From far away, Marshal Ye's pupils suddenly contracted. Golden Crow battering ram. He had personally experienced the power of Xiao Mo Guess move. This move was extremely powerful killing move, that surpassed the power of the general level. But the golden pillar in front of him felt completely different than the one that Xiao Mo Gu had used. Pressure. Yes, it was pressure. This time was a suffocating pressure. The moment the pillar formed, the sky and earth seemed to moving, time seemed to stop, the dust in the air froze, everything seemed to still. Marshal Yu knew that this was just a feeling. He knew that this was just a phenomenon that appeared because the power was great enough, but uncontrolled shock still rose from the deepest part of his mind. Clang! The gold crow battering ram heavily hit the gray shield. Marshal Ye's body shook from the impact. The sound seemed to explode inside his skull. His mind blanked for a brief moment. Those further away with weaker cultivation immediately sprayed out blood. They were seriously wounded. Under such a strong attack, the gray shield was unable to withstand it, and exploded. However, the gray shield did not dissipate immediately. It turned to dozens of gray figures that shot at the golden crow battering ram. Howls sounded in the air. Numerous wisps of gray mist suddenly came out of Zhuomo's body. When they appeared, they turned into gray shadows that charged towards the golden crow battering ram. These gray shadows turned into little gray dragons. They howled and roared as they moved along the body of the golden crow battering ram. In a blink, many tiny cracks appeared on the surface of the golden crow battering ram. The little gray dragons continued to fly out of the gray energy and join in the attack. These little dragons were vicious as they howled and roared. Their bodies were thin and long, they had 4 limbs, and their heads were triangular shaped. There were 2 extremely short horns growing at their foreheads. What was most shocking was that half of their body was a gaping maw and 2 rows of white teeth that was like 2 rows of the sharpest knives and chilled people's hearts. Boom! The golden crow battering ram suddenly fell into pieces and released golden fragments of energy. Under the dark red sky, the scattered dots of golden energy were beautiful to look at, like fireflies. An extremely beautiful scene created within extreme danger. The gray dragons that lost their target roared. Their voices were not loud, but they contained a heart-rattling brutality and bloodthirst. Because of their great number, the sound was like a tide and caused listeners' scalps to prickle. Smelling blood, the gray dragons jumped up like towards the 10 suns in the air. The streams of fire that rampaged in the dark red sky seemed to detect danger and headed for the gray dragons. The sky immediately became the most vicious battlefield. The flames and the gray dragons continued to collide and destroy each other. Neither side showed any signs of giving up. Gray dragons continued to fly out of the gray mist and the 10 suns continued to send off streams of fire. To the people watching, the scene in front of them seemed like the apocalypse. The anti-dragon claw seemed to be discontent with the fight that was at a deadlock. It suddenly shook and a vast and brutal energy flooded into Zhuomo's body. This brutal wave of energy was stronger than any of the previous surges. If Zhuomo's body had not been tempered by the anti-dragon claw, it would have been destroyed at this moment. But even after being modified by the anti-dragon claw's energies, and having formed the gray MO matrix, the gray energy still caused stabbing pains in his body wherever it passed. When this brutal energy entered Zhuomo's body, the gray MO matrix on the surface of Zhuomo's body suddenly brightened. The MO matrix flashed a strange light and gave people a feeling it seemed to have come alive. Zhuomo endured the pain and did not dare to miss any detail. He had a strong feeling. Killing move. The anti-dragon claw was about to use its killing move. Chapter 650, Rebirth. Zhuomo's intuition was accurate. The gray MO matrix on his body flashed with an unusual light that seemed to flow and slide on the surface of his body. A strong wind formed in Zhuomo's surroundings, the fine gusts of wind were like blades that sheared everything around them. The ground, the stones, the pebbles in the vicinity were turned to dust by the gusts of wind. In an instant, a hole more than 50 zhang deep appeared in the ground under Zhuomo's feet. Zhuomo's body floated motionlessly in the air. Then, a single deep roar seemed to come from within the ground. The roars of the gray dragons previously had been a multitude of fine roars like a tide, and caused people's hairs to stand on end and their scalp to prickle. This roar seemed to be a call from the ancient times, with the weight of time as it sounded from deep within the ground. For the first time, Zhuomo's mind was overcome. For some unknown reason, an indescribable emotion spread through his mind. He was not the only one. Even Marshal Ye's face shook and he entered a brief daze. Just as everyone blanked, the MO matrix on Zhuomo's body quickly changed. A shadow silently floated out of the MO matrix on Zhuomo's body. When this blurry shadow appeared, a brutal and vicious presence immediately filled the battlefield. The people who were still unfocused reacted in the most instinctive way, trembling. Unconsciously trembling. Uncontrollably trembling. Under this peerlessly brutal energy, their bodies were left cold and they trembled. Roar! A wave of anger suddenly exploded and spread through the entire field. Everyone seemed to be hit hard. The suns in the sky lit up in response to the roar of the shadow. The 10 suns revolved in the sky at an extremely slow rate. A great and pure power formed from the revolving suns. Zhuo was the first one to recover. He did not forget that he was dealing with a dangerous situation. If he was the least bit careless, he wouldn't even get a chance to amend the situation. Every detail of what was happening in his body clearly flashed across his mind. He knew that every detail had a chance of determining his fate, life or death. He needed to find that minuscule chance from all this. There were many transformations that he had a hard time understanding. Both the Sun Crystal Seed and the Anti-Dragon Claw represented power of a higher level, each beyond his knowledge. But he was still memorized it and did not give up. The terrifying presence released by the blurry shadow caused his soul to tremble instinctively. Suddenly, he saw a colossal beast. Its rampaging presence and its enormous shadow enveloped his minuscule figure. The strong pressure he felt left him suffocating. This was... The shadow suddenly broke free of Zhuomo's body and flew into the sky. Dragon. A true dragon. The blurry figure held the presence of a true dragon. In the moment it flew into the air, the presence of the king of all beasts rippled outwards like a pebble thrown into water. No one knew that at this time, in this Jia, all the animals were prostrated on the ground as they trembled. But in Zhuomo's mind, what it gave off was not the energy of a dragon, but a cold and brutal killing essence. It was as though its sharp thick dragon claws dripped with black blood. The purest of all killing essences. In this moment, even the 3,000 strands of worry decided to retreat. Other than the thickest few strands, the other strands of worry released the anti-dragon claw. The anti-dragon claw that a portion of its restraints had been undone and unhesitatingly displayed its power and brutality. This dragon shadow moved like a blur of grey lightning and Zhuo was unable to see its path clearly. As the shadow blurred, a sun at its peak intensity fell from the sky. Streaking through the sky like a comet, it howled as it smashed towards the grey shadow. Roar! The grey shadow suddenly roared, the killing energy reaching a peak. Rushing upwards, it fearlessly welcomed the sun's incoming attack. Pure killing essence was like the sharpest blade essence in the world. Both sides were peerless in their speed. 2 lights, one gold and one grey, drew across the horizon and collided. Dong! An deafening sound. The entire Jia shuddered. There was no explosion, no gust of air, just a terrifying sound of the collision. Everyone felt the golden light brighten until it was blinding. Their vision went white. But the light quickly faded and their vision recovered. Then they found that flames were raining down. Every thread of flame was a seed that had been caught in the wind and floated in the air. But this was just the beginning. The 9 remaining suns in the sky suddenly fell one after another. Dong dong dong. With every sound, Zhuomo's body reflexively shook. Blood seeped out from his hose, eyes, and mouth. No matter if it was the 10 Crow celestial domain or the shadow of the dragon, they were connected to him. When the two were fighting like this without any regard the damage they suffered, Zhuomo's body was collateral damage. If this was in the past, his body would have been unable to endure the backlash from the fight. Fortunately, his body had been strengthened, but even so, with every impact, his body suffered a heavy blow. The power inside his body was not under his control but it still existed. Every impact was soul-rattling, and the entire Jia trembled in unison. 10 times in succession, the Sun Crystal Seed and the Anti-Dragon Claw clashed and did not leave anything behind. The magnitude of the backlash that Zhuo Mo's body endured reached a shocking intensity. The gray Mo matrix on the surface his body was twisted and tangled in on itself like metal wire. The rain of fire gathered back into 10 suns again. However, they were several times smaller and dimmer than before. They were like 10 red beads that entered Zhuo Mo's body again. The earth-shaking collision surpassed Zhuo Mo's knowledge. In front of such great power, Zhuo Mo could not react at all. However, the battle had not ended. The two, now wounded, returned to the old battlefield back in Zhuo Mo's body. The conflict was not as powerful as before, but in terms of danger, it was even greater. The Sun Crystal Seed was much dimmer, but it still continued to release hot flows. Zhuo Mo discovered that the hot flows released by the Sun Crystal Seed was weaker than before. The Anti-Dragon Claw's presence was also weaker. Once again, the battlefield was where the 10 sun matrices were located. The power of the two sides weakened as they continued to destroy each other. Zhuo Mo found to his joy that the suppression of his power seemed to show signs of weakening. But the damage his body endured became greater. As the two powers continued to weaken each other, they did not have any power to spare to heal Zhuo Mo's body. The Greenvine mystical water was still being suppressed. While there was signs of release, it was still unable to move. Zhuo Mo started to feel urgency. He knew that as the two powers weakened, he would regain control of his body, but he was afraid that his body would be damaged beyond repair by that point. He could not wait until that moment. As the suppression weakened, Zhuo Mo's mind recovered its usual nimbleness. He did not hesitate and made a decision. He had to do something. The only card he had left was the soul-setting divine light. At this time, no matter what, he had to try. His body was pushed to the point where it was going to completely collapse. His first target was one of the sun matrices, the sun matrix at his forehead. The sun matrix was much dimmer than before, but there was still much of the hot flows of energy from the Sun Crystal Seed inside. The brutal energies of the Anti-Dragon Claw outside were continuously attacking this sun matrix. The power of the two sides collided and shifted as they fought of dominance. The soul-setting divine light suddenly appeared. Without any warning, the two powers were suddenly frozen in place. No, set in place. The sun matrix that had been restless just now was strangely calm. The following changes were out of Zhuo Mo's expectations. Zhuo Mo had observed that the two powers had been colliding and destroying each other. But now the situation seemed slightly different. When the power of the two apparent mortal enemies was set, Zhuo Mo discovered that there was a novel power that glittered like the stars that was left around the sun matrix. This power was not like any power that Zhuo Mo knew of. Compared to the brutality and dominance of the Anti-Dragon Claw and the Sun Crystal Seed, these strange fragments of power were unusually peaceful and gentle. As Zhuo Mo's thoughts moved to examine the fragments, they entered Zhuo Mo's blood and flesh. The next change brought joy to Zhuo Mo. These seemingly peaceful and harmless fragments had the strong ability to heal and regenerate. Once they entered Zhuo Mo's flesh, the flesh started to miraculously heal. Yet the healed flesh seemed different than before. There was no time for Zhuo Mo to study it carefully now. There were 9 other sun matrices where the battle was raged on. With his confidence boosted, Zhuo Mo urged the soul-setting divine light towards another sun matrix. The soul-setting divine light was as powerful as expected. Anything that it shined on, regardless of the intensity of the battle, would be immediately set. Zhuo Mo furiously searched for the fragments of power that appeared after the two powers collided. He had them enter his flesh and the effects were great. As 3 sun matrices were sealed by the soul-setting divine light, both the Anti-Dragon Claw and the Sun Crystal Seed seemed to have recognized that their control over the situation was quickly unraveling. The two powers immediately retreated. Boom! Zuomo's body suddenly shook. He once again had control over his body. The joy at surviving this hardship rose. In this moment, he had an impulse to cry from joy. But he quickly calmed his mind. At this time, there were more important things to do. The strange new power that was floating around the sun matrices. Zuomo greedily merged every drop of this newborn power into his body. He did not waste one bit of it. These dots and particles of power were not strong, and disappeared after being merged with his flesh. Zuomo's body was healing at a visible rate. His nearly ruined body was restored in a short period of time. No, not as the same as before, but having changed again. Shen power, Ling power, Mo skill, spiritual consciousness, these familiar powers once again returned to his body. Strong confidence rose. Power was the basis of confidence. Without power, his confidence was unrooted. There was nothing more beautiful than this familiar confidence. At this time, Zuomo suddenly noticed unusual movements in the 3,000 threads of worry. From the beginning, the 3,000 threads of worry seemed to have been neutral. It did not participate in the battle between the anti-dragon claw and the sun crystal seed, so its movements now were unusually eye-catching. This was Chapter 651, When He's Sick, Take His Life. Several strands of the 3,000 strands of worry suddenly burrowed into the anti-dragon claw. The anti-dragon claw shook, but the furious struggle and resistance that Zuomo had expected from the anti-dragon claw did not come. Was it? Zuomo suddenly had a realization. The anti-dragon claw had exhausted itself in the conflict with the sun crystal seed just now and was in a weakened state. The following scene seemed to prove Zuomo's guess. Pew pew pew, the slender 3,000 threads of worry punctured the anti-dragon claw like needles. The anti-dragon claw shook but did not resist. Great opportunity. For natural-born opportunists like little Mo Gu, if he missed an opportunity like this, then he would not be little Mo Gu. With his strength, he didn't know how long it would take him to subdue the anti-dragon claw. Previously, he had only managed to hold on to the anti-dragon claw by using the 3,000 threads of worry. But holding it and subduing it was not the same. Even though the anti-dragon claw could not escape, he could not channel the power of the anti-dragon claw. Right now, this was when the anti-dragon claw was weakest and the best opportunity to subdue it. Take his life when he was sick, this principle was also able to be applied to Sky Missouri weapons. In blink, Zuomo threw aside his respect of the anti-dragon claw and started to scheme against it. Only now did he find that the 3,000 threads of worry was the most cunning and evil of the three. This guy had pretended to be neutral from the beginning but showed its hand when the anti-dragon claw showed weakness. Very vicious. But I like it. Zuomo did not wait around watching but reached out as well. Regardless of how the 3,000 threads of worry subdued the anti-dragon claw, it could not help him tame this peerless Mo weapon. He had to do it himself. Zuomo tried to reach towards the anti-dragon claw. In the moment that his hand touched the anti-dragon claw, an extremely brutal energy suddenly burrowed into Zuomo's body. Extreme fury. He felt the anger of the anti-dragon claw. Thunderous roars echoed in his mind intimidatingly. Zuomo was startled but he quickly calmed down. Compared to the vast brutal energies before, this energy was sharp but weaker, leading Zuomo to be more certain that the anti-dragon claw was in a weakened state. He found to his joy that his newly tempered body did not feel any discomfort in enduring this brutal energy. This made Zuomo overjoyed. The anti-dragon claw also noticed this quickly. Another gust of brutal energy entered Zuomo's body. Zuomo's body suddenly froze. This energy seemed the same as the one before, but when it entered Zuomo's body, he immediately detected the difference. Dark and cold. Extremely dark and cold to the point it almost froze Zuomo. At this dangerous moment, Suemo hurriedly activated the soul-setting divine light. The soul-setting divine light was as wondrous as usual. This extremely cold energy was immediately set. Suemo finally released a breath. But this energy was extremely cold and could not be absorbed like the previous brutal energies by Suemo's Mo matrix. This cold energy was extremely pure. Suemo knew his own abilities and that it would not be easy if he wanted to process it with his own power. But if he did not process it, it may lead to great trouble. An idea sparked. He thought of the remaining sun matrices. There were still many hot flows from the sun crystal seed inside the sun matrices. Would the hot and cold pair together well? His thoughts moved and Suemo threw the extremely cold energy into a sun matrix. When this energy was thrown into the sun matrix, it was like cold ice poured into boiling oil and caused a great disturbance. In moments, the extremely cold energy disappeared and half of the hot flow in the sun script was gone. More of the new power fragments appeared. Suemo was overjoyed. These unfamiliar power fragments were of great benefit to him. After digesting these power fragments, Suemo continued to focus his attention on the anti-dragon claw. At this time, his hand was tightly gripping the anti-dragon claw. This was the first time he touched the anti-dragon claw. The dragon claw was covered in icy and hard dragon scales, but the dragon scales where he held the Mo weapon were much finer than the scales elsewhere. More strands of the 3,000 strands of worry burrowed into the anti-dragon claw and it trembled even more violently. At his time, the anti-dragon claw grew dim like it had lost all of its light. Suemo gritted his teeth and reached into the anti-dragon claw along the 3,000 threads of worry. Boom! It was like Suemo's finger had been placed into a glacier. Great cold energies immediately exploded forth and spread into Suemo's body from his finger. Grey frost headed for Suemo at lightning speed. Not good. Suemo paled. He suddenly understood, he had been tricked. The anti-dragon claw purposefully pretended to appear weak to lure him. Such a cunning Mo weapon. Just as the frost was about to cover Suemo immediately, Suemo unhesitatingly threw out his ultimate card, Soul-Setting Divine Light. The Soul-Setting Divine Light seemed small but it was unexpectedly powerful. Gritting his teeth, Suemo released the cold flows towards the three remaining sun matrices. In moments, the cold energy that invaded his body had disappeared but so had the hot flows. Suemo felt some pity. He finally understood what these hot flows were. They were the base source of the sun crystal seed's power. If he could have processed them, it would have been greatly beneficial for his Shen power in the 10-Crow celestial domain. It was a pity that the cold flow had been too powerful and he could not withstand it on his own. Fortunately, the two powers had destroyed each other and created those new power fragments. After this fright, Suemo became even more cautious. The anti-dragon claw was valuable, but if he lost his life trying to tame it, then it would not be worth it. This cold energy seemed to be the last attack the anti-dragon claw had. The anti-dragon claw became almost lifeless in Suemo's hand like a withered branch. It was extremely dim and there was none of its awesome presence that it showed before. Suemo did not encounter any more resistance. His hand reached into the anti-dragon claw and easily touched the icy bone at the core. This bone seemed to be carved from ice. Suemo couldn't help but shudder when he touched it. It was too cold. But Suemo's face showed joy. He knew he had found the crux. The 3,000 threads of worry seemed to understand that Suemo had tamed the anti-dragon claw and shrank back out from the body of the anti-dragon claw. This was the first time Suemo saw the 3,000 threads of worry release the anti-dragon claw completely. Suddenly, Suemo's hand was empty. The thick anti-dragon claw had disappeared and was replaced by a grey claw bracelet on his wrist. This bracelet was dim in color and nondescript. In this moment, Suemo seemed to be dreaming. He had succeeded. He had really succeeded. A surreal feeling overwhelmed him. Had he subdued the Sky Missouri weapon anti-dragon claw like this? Looking at the gray bracelet on his wrist, Suomo's expression was slightly dazed. The entire process had been surprising, but the attempt was almost unimaginably easy. It had gone so smoothly that Suomo felt that there had been a problem somewhere along the line. Suomo quickly found that there really was a problem. No matter how he called out "Otiat," the gray bracelet did not respond at all. It did not react as though it was dead. Suomo was stunned. Why was it like this? The great disparity made him almost throw up blood. Anti-Dragon Claw. Where did my Sky Missouri weapon, Anti-Dragon Claw, go? The bracelet did not move at all and did not shine. No one would connect this dim article to the vicious and peerless Anti-Dragon Claw. Depressed, Suomo quickly sorted out his emotions. Right now, he had not completely escaped the present danger and he could not waste his time on this matter. He looked around and his gaze immediately landed on Marshal Yu. Marshal Yu did not look as at ease as he previously had. His face was white and he seemed to be wounded. Thinking about the earth-shaking conflict that had just occurred, Suomo realized that Marshal Yu had probably suffered a major injury. Suomo's guess was very accurate. Marshal Yu had been greatly affected. It could be said that the blow he had received was much greater than others. One reason was because he had been closest to Suomo when the battle had happened, so he naturally received more of the collateral damage. The other reason was because he was the strongest person present and had the deepest understanding of power. Higher-level powers affected him more than other people. However, his gaze flickered. He was wounded, but he was not demoralized. He was filled with confidence. He had been affected the most, but he had gained the most. If he could successfully recover, and could digest all that he comprehended today, his power would definitely go up a level. Suomo also understood this and his gaze became vicious. At this time, Marshal Yu had gone through a hard battle and he was wounded. This was when he was weakest. Suomo's own power had actually increased and he was at his strongest. If he waited for Marshal Yu to heal completely, the other was not someone that he could defeat under normal circumstances. He could not reach martial level anytime soon. Suomo did not know what level Marshal Yu would reach after digesting his comprehensions today. Suomo was disappointed that he could not use the power of the anti-dragon claw, but it wasn't as though he didn't have other tricks in his sleeve. Other than Xing Lianer, who was unable to fight, Woli, a Gui and a black gold seal soldier still had most of their power. With him added on, they might have a chance. This was the best chance to kill Marshal Yu. No matter what, he had to keep Marshal Yu from leaving. Otherwise, there would be trouble in the future. Suomo suddenly showed his viciousness. He gritted his teeth. With a sudden flicker of his body, he dove at Marshal Yu. Kill Marshal Yu. Almost as his words sounded, Ague, Woli and the others moved. Bihan had been far away and not been affected too greatly by the shockwaves. But he still felt nauseous. Fortunately, the nightmarish battle had finished and he recovered. The fight between the 10 Crow Celestial Domain and the Grey Dragon had been heart-stopping, but even then, Bihan's gaze had not left the others' ranks. He noticed that the ranks of the Yu frontier guards had been affected and become messy. Innumerable weaknesses appeared clearly in his eyes. When Suomo shot at Marshal Yu, Bihan admired Suomo's decisiveness. Almost at the same time, Xin Battalion silently moved towards the Yu frontier guards. Chapter 652, Struggles. Suomo's charge was sudden and Marshal Yu was caught off his guard. Even if his strength had been affected by his injuries, he was still not someone that Xiao Mo Gu could defeat. Didn't the exchange just now reveal that? Or did Xiao Mo Gu think that he could be taken down with the aid of the anti-dragon claw? A smile blossomed on Marshal Yu's face. A hint of disdain and derision flashed through his eyes. The anti-dragon claw was powerful and the wounds he had received were not light. The power of any weapon was determined by the wielder. He was sure now that while the anti-dragon claw was in Xiao Mo's possession, he had not subdued it. Since it was not subdued, the anti-dragon claw was ownerless. A sharp light flashed through his eyes. Seeing Zhuo Mo and the others leap at him, he was not afraid. With a smirk he activated the rain domain of no return again. Under the peerless brutal energy of the anti-dragon claw, the rain domain of no return was fragile. However, without the suppression of the anti-dragon claw, the rain domain of no return was soft but fatal. The thin strands of rain were gentle and lingered in the air. Yet Marshal Yu, who had focused almost all of his attention on Xiao Mo, did not notice that the purple light in Agui's eyes was much stronger than before. No one noticed the change. Agui had been severely wounded. Her Shen power had been suppressed by the rain domain of no return. Then she had been caught in the conflict between the anti-dragon claw and the 10-crow celestial domain. Yet at this time, her expression seemed to suggest she was unaffected. Her snowy white bare feet did not have a speck of dust on them. She stood in the air like a ghost. The purple energy in her eyes was so thick it was almost tangible. If Zhuo Mo saw this, he would be astounded. The purple light in Agui's eyes had an additional eerie light, its presence thicker than it had ever been before. Agui's expression was indifferent. She glanced at Zhuo Mo. In that moment, the indifference on her face melted like the snow. She quickly turned away and her expression returned to indifference. Her bare feet silently stepped on the empty air and her figure disappeared. Zhuo Mo did not know of Agui's transformation. At this time, he only focused on Marshal Yu. There was not a stray thought in his mind. 10-crow celestial domain. When the sky became dark red again, many people reflexively raised their heads. The 10-crow celestial domain that the sun crystal seed had created had been so powerful it frightened them to their core. However, they quickly found that Zhuo Mo's 10-crow celestial domain was not as powerful as it was previously. In the midst of it all, Marshal Yu became even more confident that the one that had been fighting the anti-dragon claw was most likely another great treasure and not Xiao Mo. Having thought this through, a disdainful smile rose on his lips. He did not need to be wary of this 10-crow celestial domain, instead he was angered that Xiao Mo dared to use a general-level 10-crow celestial domain against him. It really was an offense. The Mo had strict ranks. In front of martial levels, generals were like ants. Marshal Yu had a great army and his strength as a marshal was enough for him to look down on others. Until now he had gone easy on Zhuo Mo because of his fondness for talented individuals. But right now, his heart was filled with murderousness and he did not have any benevolence left. The 10-crow celestial domain moved. A golden pillar came from the sky. Golden crow battering ram. The disdain on Marshal Yu's lips deepened. This Xiao Mo just didn't know what was good for him, he was as dumb as an ox. This move clearly was not of any threat to him, yet Xiao Mo dared to use this move. It was laughable. The green carp-tongued sword pointed into the sky. Rain suddenly gathered, spinning, and funneled to a point. The strands of rain swam and twisted around the golden crow battering ram. Idiot! Zhuo Mo had a similar smile of disdain that flashed across his lips before his expression became focused again. It was the golden crow battering ram, and appeared the same as it did before. When the swirling rain wrapped around the golden crow battering ram, a strange field of power surrounded the golden crow battering ram. Immediately, the golden crow battering ram seemed to have sunk into a bog and slowed down. There was no panic on Zhuo Mo's face, and his eyes lit up. He huffed lightly and then shouted, "Scatter!" Boom! The golden crow battering ram suddenly exploded. Countless needle-like golden lights suddenly spread into the surroundings. The rain that had surrounded the golden crow battering ram evaporated, and the needles of golden light entered the rain. Marshal Yu immediately grunted as his body wavered. He had not expected that Sui Mo was laying a trap. His expression was both shocked and irritated. Sui Mo had seen the entire process of how the Sun Crystal Seed set up the 10-Crow Celestial Domain. He had memorized all of the transformations of the 10-Crow Celestial Domain. This was something unimaginable to him in the past. No one could say that they understood the 10-Crow Celestial Domain well. Even Pu Yao and Wei did not know too much about the 10-Crow Celestial Domain. This had meant Sui Mo needed to explore on his own. He had not expected that the Sun Crystal Seed would borrow his 10-Crow Celestial Domain and reveal its secrets. The higher level power performed all the transformations of the 10-Crow Celestial Domain and helped even his Mo matrix mature to its completion. This was a benefit to Sui Mo. A mature and perfected 10-Crow Celestial Domain. After seeing all the transformations of the 10-Crow Celestial Domain, he knew which direction to cultivate to go up a level. He still needed time to digest and practice what he had gained today, but undoubtedly, even without the anti-dragon claw, Sui Mo's strength had completely transformed. He purposefully used the golden crow battering ram to trick Marshal Yu. When he saw Marshal Yu's figure sway, he knew he had succeeded. However, he did not feel any pride. This was a difficult battle that had just begun. Could a marshal be killed so easy? If this was a different place and time, Sui Mo definitely would not choose such a suicidal course of action. But he knew that if he did not kill Marshal Yu, all that waited them was endless pursuit. Marshal Yu wasn't just powerful individually, he possessed many powerful battalions. After he recovered, it would just be a matter of time before everyone's died. Once Sui Mo made his decision, he did not hesitate one bit. With the first attack having succeeded, he continued onwards. Bihan led Sin Battalion and charged into the enemy formation like a sharp knife. In his eyes, the weaknesses in the Yu Frontier Guards formation were clear. His charge was determined. All in Sin Battalion were Mo with incomplete souls. They did not know fear, did not have emotions. They would systematically carry out all of Bihan's orders. They were the true killing machines. Bihan, who was usually reserved, was like a fiery blade, boisterous and powerful. The Yu Frontier Guards had not thought the enemy would dare to charge their formation. They were caught off guard and immediately suffered a great number of casualties. The Sin Battalion was like a bolt of lightning that split the Yu Frontier battle formation into two. If one looked down from the sky right, they could clearly see that the route the Sin Battalion advanced was not straight, but zigzagged. Bihan's path when he charged each time was precise. All the points he passed through were weaknesses he had detected. The Yu Frontier Guards finally woke up from their shock. Then they found their thick ranks had been divided in two by the enemy. Corpses were littered everywhere, their battle formation was disheveled mess, the usually proud Yu Frontier Guards were left furious. When had someone dared to charge at the Yu Frontier Guards? When had someone else dismissed the battle prowess of the Yu Frontier Guards so? The foundation of the Yu Frontier Guards showed its depth now. Though Marshal Yu was not present, some general-level battle generals started to direct the battalions. The lucky Yu Frontier elite that had survived the earlier battle quickly returned to the ranks. The experts that had been guarding the chariot flew to the very front in the hopes that they would buy some time for the main army to rally. Yet they underestimated the skill level of battle general they were facing. A snarl suddenly appeared on Bihan's icy face. He felt that his blood was boiling, desire for battle filling his heart. He wanted to howl into the sky. Kill! A shout thundered across the sky. Sin Battalion attacked again. Sui Mo was extremely cautious about Marshal Yu's rain domain of no return. He chose close-quarter combat. He was now familiar with the transformations of the 10-Crow Celestial Domain, but 1, he had not mastered all of the transformations, and 2, the general-level 10-Crow Celestial Domain was not a match for the martial-level Rain Domain of no return. He was not the Sun Crystal Seed and could not bring out such high-level power. Zuo Mo's attitude of fighting to the death infuriated Marshal Yu. Marshal Yu had been of high status for a long time. It had been many years since someone dared to offend him, and not give in to his demands. He was not afraid of close-quarter combat. The green carp-tongued sword disappeared from his hand. Without seeming to take a stance, his hand flipped and he made a grabbing motion towards Zuo Mo hiss. Like the hiss of a snake, an enormous clawed shadow left his hand and flew towards Zuo Mo. Zuo Mo felt his vision darken. The enormous clawed shadow covered his field of vision. A terrifying gust of wind rushed at him like a snake. Fighting spirit roiled in Zuo Mo's eyes. He did not dodge. His hands came together and his body straightened towards the clawed shadow. A golden light shaped like a spike covered Zuo Mo's entire body. Decisively he charged at Marshal Yu's clawed shadow. Gold thread spike. One of the 10 transformations of the 10 Crow celestial apparatus. The two forces collided in a clash of brute force boom. Zuo Mo vision filled with a blinding light and his body shook. The backlash of power was like being struck by lightning. He couldn't help but grunt. However, his hand was held steady and did not shift. His vision cleared up. He had charged through the clawed shadow. Zuo Mo's confidence increased. The golden light brightened and its presence became sharper. Yet at this time, the black gold seal soldier and Ague had both sneaked near Marshal Yu. They had surrounded him. Marshal Yu did not reveal any panic on his face. He was unaffected as though he did not care about the destruction of his clawed shadow. He stared at Zuo Mo and suddenly smiled. Then Zuo Mo felt a strange and extremely powerful suction force pull his body to the side. This was... Zuo Mo was startled. You really think that a domain of a marshal only has such simple capabilities? 30 zhang around Marshal Yu rain started to come down in a drizzle. Through the drizzling rain, Marshal Yu's disdainful voice clearly passed into Zuo Mo's ears. The rain domain of no return. Chapter 653, Agui's attack. Rain domain of no return. The smaller rain domain of no return was just 30 zhang in diameter, did not span a large range like it had previously. Yet the area it enveloped a strange and powerful repulsive power. This strange power was not large in expanse but it was frighteningly powerful. Zuo Mo had never thought that even with such a fast attack, he was still forced off his mark. He was surprised that the domain could be used like this. It really was wondrous. The reason he had chosen close-quarter combat was so that he could avoid Marshal Yu's rain domain of no return. He hadn't thought that he would end up colliding with the rain domain of no return anyway. Had never expected that Marshal Yu could use the rain domain of no return in close quarters. Zuo Mo was too fast. When he was pulled astray by the field of power, he was not able to react in time and could only watch as he darted past Marshal Yu. Marshal Yu was prepared and his hand lightly reached toward Zuo Mo. If his hand landed, Zuo Mo would be seriously injured if not killed. Marshal Yu's movements were mighty and forceful. Just a glancing blow would result in a serious injury. Facing at a life and death situation, Zuo Mo's response was quick. Whoosh, the space around him suddenly became dark red. A wave of hot air spread into the surroundings. 10 Crow Celestial Domain. Zuo Mo used what he had just learned and activated the 10 Crow Celestial Domain. Marshal Yu laughed coldly. His hand did not shift from its path. The hand seemed to be weak but Zuo Mo felt his breathing stop in his throat. Little Mo's expression changed drastically. His 10 Crow Celestial Domain was channeled to its limits but he didn't have any confidence he could stop this blow. At this time, a figure suddenly charged out. Pia! A clear sound of a collision rang out and the figure that rushed forward flew backwards. Marshal Yu's blow was forced slightly astray by this figure. The air pressure of the blow brushed Zuo Mo's body and passed into the empty space behind him. It created a deep hole over 20 zhang in the ground. It was the black gold seal soldier that was thrown backwards. He bared his teeth and hissed. His expression indicated the pain he felt, and the seal scripts on his body became dimmer. Suemo was calm. He found that while his 10-crow celestial domain was suppressed by Martial Yes rain domain of no return, he could still cancel out the strange effects the repulsive field had on him. While Martial Yu overbearing in his movements and blows, he clearly was not skilled in close physical combat. This was an opportunity. Suomo's body twisted. Like a slippery fish, he followed the path the strange field of power flowed in and suddenly appeared below Martial Yes' right. His right hand formed a fist that suddenly exploded with blinding golden light and furiously dancing golden flames, fire fist of the first heavenly stem. 10 transformations, ranking first in dominance, the first fire. 1. Martial Yu snorted coldly. His left arm raised, the 5 fingers of his hand extended towards Suo. Bam 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 bam. Like heavy beats of a drum, 5 terrifying gusts of air hit Suomo's fire fist of the first heavenly stem. Suomo was struck heavily. His body shook and the flames dancing on his right fist were forcibly extinguished. Even more terrifying was that when the 5 gusts of air hit his fist, 1/2 of his body was left numb and unable to move. At this time, countless black chains appeared out of the air and burrowed into the rain domain of no return. Woli had attacked. These chains were like the sharpest of sword essences. In a blink, they pierced the rain domain of no return. The rain domain of no return had a strange field of power in the 30 zhang it covered, but it was too small of an area. It stopped the great majority of the chains, but 2 still managed to pierce through it. The 2 chains twisted in strange positions within the rain domain of no return. Martial Yu, who had been calm until now, changed expression. The twisting chains caused the invisible field of power to appear. Suddenly, a ghostly figure ran alongside the chain and entered the field of power to silently appear behind Martial Yu. A Gui. Her eyes were filled with purple energy. Her hand pressed in the empty air 3 cun from Martial Yes' back. There was no sound. Martial Yes' body suddenly shook. His expression froze on his face, his eyes filled with disbelief. Why was it like this? Why was it like this? He stood woodenly. He wanted to turn around, but no matter how hard he tried, his body did not listen to him. The light in his eyes retreated like the tide, and in a blink, the light was gone. The Yu frontier guards had incurred heavy losses. Bihan Sin Battalion harvested life with an indifferent attitude. They did not have pity, feel sympathy, or know exhaustion. They continuously charged at the Yu frontier guards' ranks. Even though they had fewer members, they held the advantage. They were strong and vicious. They never feared engagements where they were outnumbered. They continuously shifted their positions. Each tactic was unexpected. From the initial charge, they held the advantage. The Yu frontier guards having a very difficult time and were exhausted. They lacked a powerful battle general to lead them. In Bihan's eyes, a battalion like this was full of holes to exploit. If it wasn't for the Yu frontier guards' flexibility, they would have crumbled a long time ago. But if this continued, the defeat of the Yu frontier guards would just be a matter of time. This battle general is too powerful. Ming Yu Wei was shocked, she almost couldn't speak. She was not the only one, Ming Hui and the others were stunned. At this time, they finally understood just how powerful this battle general they had fought was. In the beginning, they had thought of taking advantage of the chaos and to attack Sin Battalion from behind. But after seeing the entire battle, their lips trembled and their limbs felt cold. They couldn't muster up those thoughts any longer. They saw with their own eyes how Sin Battalion dismembered the Yu frontier guards. The comparatively slow responses of the Yu frontier guards could not stop the predation by Sin Battalion at all. At times they were as sly as wolves, and at others as ferocious as tigers. The battle general of Sin Battalion was unbelievably powerful. His control of the entire battlefield reached a frightening level. But what shocked people even more was Bihan's unrelenting style of fighting. They would aim at the enemy's weakness with strong attacks. A minor weakness would quickly worsen. Then this weakness would become more significant until it affected the entire battle. And if the enemy managed to surround them, they would find an opening at the most opportune time and fight their way out before turning around and slaughtering the pursuers. In this short battle, the Yu frontier guards had suffered great losses. Their advantage was slowly growing because the battle formation of the Yu frontier guards broke down under their repeated charges. If they managed to completely destroy the battle formation of the Yu frontier guards, then no matter how many people the Yu frontier guards had, they would become lambs waiting for slaughter. It really was powerful. Ming Hui and the others accepted their loss. They had lost for reason. The death of Marshal Yu became the straw that broke the camel's back. Many of the Yu frontier guards that were fighting saw Marshal Yu's body fall from the sky and were left dumbstruck. Some had even started to cry. Terror and hopelessness spread like the plague across the battlefield. The Yu frontier guards' morale had almost been broken by the charges of Sin Battalion had complete collapsed. Everywhere Sin Battalion passed, blood and flesh flew. Bihan was like a bloodthirsty blade as he directed Sin Battalion. The outcome of the battle was set, but Bihan did not relent. He continued to slaughter the Yu frontier guards. He was like a meat grinder on full power. A killing machine. There were no words that could describe what everyone felt right now. They saw the death of Marshal Yu with their own eyes. This was the marshal to died of unnatural causes in hundreds of years. There was a saying in the Mo territories, only marshals could kill marshals. However, they saw a marshal die at the hands of some unknown people. Among them, the most famous was Xiao Mo Gu. While Xiao Mo Gu seemed to have some fame in Great Peace City, but in the entire 100 Savage of the Dark, he was a nobody compared to Marshal Yu, someone who had been famed for decades. What was even harder to accept was that there wasn't a marshal among them. Everyone had believed that Marshal Yu would ultimately win in the end. Even when the anti-Dragon Claw had been dominating, no one thought that Marshal Yu would fall in battle. But Marshal Yu had died. Felled by the hand of an unknown female. That female was the maid standing next to Xiao Mo Gu. No one present even knew her name. The great Marshal Yu fell to a woman like this. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, no one would have believed it. Even now, they did not understand why Marshal Yu died. Mo panted heavily. His fight with Marshal Yu had been short, but it was a dance with death. Mo felt very surprised that a Gui had killed Marshal Yu. But when he saw the burning purple energy in a Gui's eyes, he suddenly understood why she succeeded and his expression changed. He didn't feel any joy. With a flash, he appeared next to a Gui and grabbed her hand. What he didn't notice was a thread of warmth flashed through her purple eyes when he grabbed a Gui's hand. Mo's heart sank. The purple energy in a Gui's body was now many times stronger than it had ever been. This was not good. The purple energy was a very eerie power. It could make a Gui very powerful, but at the same time, it would corrode a Gui's body, destroy her vitality and seal her 6 senses. Mo understood that a Gui had definitely suffered extremely serious injuries in exchange for the victory just now. The purple energy was unique in that it would become stronger after injury. But even so, it could not be so strong. Mo looked at a Gui. He knew that something had happened to her just now. Mo didn't feel the joy of victory. The purple energy in a Gui's body was so strong. Her condition would quickly worsen and her connection with the outside world would be completely blocked. Damn it! Mo's expression was dark. A Gui silently stood next to him as he held her hand. Her eyes filled with purple energy were gentle. Looking around, Mo knew he finally won. However, what he did not know that a similarly intense battle was occurring in another place. Chapter 654, Guliang Dao looked at the MO battalions who had almost been wiped out and praised. Brother Gongsun's battalion is peerlessly sharp. Guliang Dao's figure was tall, his features rough and his voice boomed like a drum. His face was weathered and he didn't look anything like the disciples of the four great sects who lived in comfort. His praise attracted agreement from the commanders around him. They all nodded. These battle generals from Xixian were all subordinates of Guliang Dao. They had followed him for a long time, and usually had their eyes up in the sky. But right now, they did not disguise the admiration they felt. This battalion was qualified to be treated this way. Gongsun Cha smiled bashfully and said, "Brother Gu is too complimentary. If it was not for Brother Gu's help, we would still be traveling here." His tone was sincere. The battalions of Gongsun Cha and Guliang Dao had met in Old Field Jia and the two had immediately started to fight. Guliang Dao had been shocked by the power of Vermilion Bird Camp and he immediately ordered his battalion to retreat. Even though Vermilion Bird Camp had some Mo among their ranks, the great majority of them were sword shio. Guliang Dao had thought that this was a core battalion from Kunlun and sent someone to inquire. When he learned that the other was not a Kunlun battalion, Guliang Dao was even more shocked. If he did not see it with his own eyes, he wouldn't believe that any faction other than the four great sects would have such a strong battalion. Guliang Dao appeared rough but he was actually detail-oriented. He immediately began forming a relationship with the unknown faction. A strong battalion and a top-ranked battle general, they were worth the effort to establish amicable relations. The battalion that Guliang Dao led had been undefeated in the Mo territories. He hadn't felt any pain at giving this Old Field Jia up to Gongsun Cha if he had to. When he learned that Gongsun Cha was doing all this to meet up with a single person, Guliang Dao was filled with curiosity. Such a powerful battalion, and such a powerful battalion general, their origins would not be simple. Any person that could have them as an escort would not be simple. And when he heard about how Gongsun Cha and the others were traveling through numerous jia and fought innumerable battles in search of his Xixiang, he was moved. After pondering for a few moments, he decided to help Gongsun Cha. Gongsun Cha hadn't thought that the other would be willing to help him. Seeing the other's sincerity, Gongsun Cha agreed. With Guliang Dao as company, their rate of advance accelerated. The two battalions traveled together and as they continued to fight along the way, their admiration of each other increased. Nothing had to be said of Guliang Dao's status. He was the most famous battle general of Xixian, and one of the top battle generals in the world. But he had not thought that Gongsun Cha could rival himself. Gongsun Cha's style was strange and hard to predict. After spending time with Gongsun Cha, Guliang Dao had gained a better understanding of this person and respect had formed. Guliang Dao was an open person and valued friendship highly. Guliang Dao came from Xixian but he was not one of the core disciples. He had obtained his present position purely through fighting. Gongsun Cha had never expected that Xixian's tiger general, famed through the world, was not a core disciple. Whenever this was mentioned, Guliang Dao's subordinates had expressions of rage. Gongsun Cha felt this was hard to believe. Such a famed battle general yet his sect did not value him. Were the higher-ups of Xixian blind? Later on he learned that Guliang Dao's good friend had died due to the son of one of the higher-ups in the sect. Guliang Dao had waited for a chance and heavily injured this disciple. If it wasn't that the matter eventually blew up, that higher-up would have already taken Guliang Dao's life. But while he managed to live, he had offended the majority of the higher-ranking members of the sect. This meant he could not safely stay in the sect so he was sent to Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia. He had fought many battles of varying scale, all the while the core disciples of the sect had schemed against him but he managed to survive and accumulate achievements. His victories meant that, in public, the sect had to reward him, but in the shadows they colluded against him. They did so by sending him on ever-increasingly dangerous missions. He had, against the odds, miraculously survived and grew even stronger. Because of his openness and the value he placed on friendship, a group had gradually formed around him. The people he attracted were not valued by the sect, but they were talented and skilled. Gongsun Cha gaped when he heard this. He had never thought that Shi Xian's tiger general, who seemed to be so honored on the surface, was forced into such a bad situation. Gu Yongdao did not care about these matters and brushed them away with a smile. While his relationship with the sect's higher-ups was terrible, he was open and willing to help others. This allowed him to make many friends from many places. Gongsun Cha wondered why Gu Yongdao did not leave Shi Xian. With his strength, he would have an easy time no matter where he was. However, Gongsun Cha did not ask. Everyone had core beliefs they held on to and guarded. With 2 powerful battalions and 2 top-ranked battle generals, the road forward was smooth. But when they were just about to arrive at Great Peace City, they suddenly encountered a lot of MO. These MO came from different families, and they carried MO weapons. The group seemed to be scheming something. Once battle started, Gu Yongdao was a completely different person. Before the MO could react, he sent the order to charge. He was decisive and did not hesitate at all. Vermilion Bird Camp was not willing to fall behind and also entered the fray. The battle was one-sided. Gu Yongdao and Gongsun Cha even had the time to idly chat. The battle quickly finished, but during the cleanup phase of the battle, when Gongsun Cha heard the terms, Great Peace City, Xiao Mo Gu, Great Peace Treasure Pavilion, from the captives, his expression immediately changed. Especially when he heard that Marshal Yesu Frontier Guard had arrived ahead of them, Gongsun Cha's face almost turned completely white. Even Gu Yongdao's expression became more serious. A martial level. Gu Yongdao had interacted with the MO ever since Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia. He knew what a martial level existence represented. But he still didn't hesitate to accompany Gongsun Cha to Great Peace City. Feeling urgency, Gongsun Cha headed for Great Peace City at full speed. But when they arrived at Great Peace City, they saw Bihan massacring the Yu frontier guards. With the little black dots appearing in the sky, the calm expressions of Great Peace City's populace immediately changed. Bihan, who had been excited by the slaughter, immediately became calm again. He forced down the murderousness he felt and stopped his slaughter. He carefully retreated back to Zhuo Mo's side. He narrowed his eyes and stared at the battalions flying over at high speed. His gaze suddenly focused. 2 battalions. His skill was high and he immediately recognized that the 2 battalions flying at them were 2 elite battalions. He felt his heart shudder. He had had a fun time in the fight just now, but he had also expended great energy. If a conflict occurred, then it would not end well. Gongsun Cha and Gu Yongdao had seen Bihan's almost mad style of fighting. Both of them were surprised. But when Gongsun Cha saw Bihan fly next to Zhuo Mo and set up a perimeter, he immediately understood. As expected of Shi Xiang, Gongsun Cha praised inwardly. When he saw Zhuo Mo was safe and unharmed, he immediately released a breath. Then he became excited. He had finally found Shi Xiang after traveling so far. When Vermilion Bird Camp saw Zhuo Mo, they couldn't help but cheer. At this time, everyone's tense nerves relaxed. So these were Xiao Mo guest people. But Princess Xia and the others had expressions of shock and surprise. They had already been shocked at Bihan's Sin Battalion, but now 2 battalions that could rival Sin Battalion had arrived. What was Xiao Mo guest's background? However, once they discovered that the majority of these 2 battalions were Xiuzhe, the crow shifted again. Was Xiao Mo Gu also a Xiuzhe? The fighting between Mo and Xiuzhe was an everyday occurrence. The Mo had a deep hatred of Xiuzhe. If it wasn't for the strength of these 2 battalions, many people would have attacked already. When Zhu Ku and the others looked at Zhuo Mo, their expressions were complex. Only Princess Xia's expression returned to normal after a momentary pause. The arrival of Vermilion Bird Camp led by Gongsun Cha allowed Xu Long and the others to relax. The suppressed exhaustion crashed into them like a tide and they could only yield to their bodies. With Gong Sun Cha introducing them, Zhua Mo and Gu Liang Dao met each other and thanked each other for the help. Gu Liang Dao examined Zhua Mo and was filled with shock. He hadn't thought that Zhua Mo could be so young. When he heard Vermilion Bird Camp's cheers just now, he knew that Zhua Mo was extremely well liked by these people. It was not easy to accomplish that. Also, observing what he had from this journey alongside Vermilion Bird Camp, he knew just how proud this battalion was. This person was impressive to have received such affection from Vermilion Bird Camp. Gu Liang Dao's gaze then landed on Bihan. At this moment, Bihan was like sword that had been resheathed. There wasn't any edge to him and it was the exact opposite of his bloodthirsty battle state just now. Detecting Gu Liang Dao's gaze, Bihan didn't even flick an eyelid and stood silently at the side. The icy blue Mo matrix made him appear like an ice cube giving off cold air. Gu Liang Dao suddenly spoke, "Are you Bihan of Sin Battalion?" Bihan stilled. He hadn't thought that the other would recognize him. He nodded. "That's me." Gu Liang Dao's eyes lit up. He smiled and said pointedly, "The rumors say much about the most accomplished battle generals of Xian Kong Temple. Jiang Zhe is flexible, and Bihan is fearless. Seeing you today, the rumors are not false." Bihan frowned. "I am not of Xian Kong Temple." Gu Liang Dao wasn't surprised at all and nodded. He said, "I have also heard of the matter of Brother B." He couldn't help but glance at Zhua Mo. The news that Bihan had fled Xian Kong Temple wasn't a secret among the higher-ups in the Xiuzhou world and the information had been spread far. Sin Battalion had always been one of the core battalions of Xian Kong Temple. The defection and betrayal of a battle general and a core battalion from the four great sects had never happened before. What he also had never expected was that Bihan would pledge his allegiance to this unknown Xiao Mo Gu. "1. Who are you?" Bihan hadn't expected the other to know so much about him and was slightly surprised. When he had been in Xian Kong Temple, he never went out. There were only a rare few that knew so much about him, yet the other had managed to easily identify him. "Shi Xian's Gu Liang Dao." Gu Liang Dao smiled. "I have heard of you." Bihan nodded and understood. No wonder the other knew of him, he was a disciple of the four great sections. The competition between the four great sects had been ongoing for thousands of years. The factions had a thorough knowledge of their rivals. "Your days aren't easy, why don't you join us?" Bihan said directly. Gu Liang Dao's smile froze on his face. "You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.